Chapter 1230. The only difference between the three kings was the leader of Wara, Yesen. It could be said that he was the one who first came into contact with Yang Chendong. At that time, Yang Chendong was only the sixth brother of the Yang family and had not shown any military talent. In less than 10 years, Yang Chendong already had a territory that was countless times larger than his own. This made him feel ashamed, and at the same time, he knew that such an opponent would not back down, let alone talk about peace. Not putting his hopes on peace talks, Yesen also did not contact the kings of the three kingdoms. In his view, since the five-star army came and they could not talk about peace, then the three kingdoms could not back down and could only fight with the five-star army. Whether or not he allied with them would not change this fact. Since that was the case, why would he need to ally with them? If he had the time, it would be better to look further and find a stronger ally to resist the five-star army. The allies that Yesen targeted were the descendants of the Mongol White Horde, Jiani Bet Khan and his brother Keliyai. In 1428 AD, the White Horde was divided, and Abul seized the opportunity to seize the ruling power of the White Horde. He and his brother Keliyai rebelled against Abul's rule. After they were defeated, they led their troops to seek refuge in the eastern Chagatai Khanate. They were not welcomed by the Khanate and were arranged to be nomads between the Chu and Taraz rivers. Keliyai and his men supported Jiani Bet Khan and established the Kazakh Khanate. At this time, the two of them had just become Khans. The entire Kazakh Khanate was still in a period of instability, and there were still some opposing forces that appeared from time to time. In order to gain the trust of the two brothers, Yesen sent one of his most trusted and one of the four remaining generals, Bo-Muir, to lead 50,000 elite Wala cavalry into the Kazakh Khanate and eliminate the opposing forces one by one. In more than a month, who knew how many people they had killed, gradually stabilizing Jiani Bet Khan's position and gaining the friendship of his brother Keliyai. Seeing that it was about time, Bo-Muir brought up the matter of the five-star army. He even mentioned that if the lips were gone, the teeth would feel cold. Just like the rise of the Mongol Empire in the past, the five-star army will also slaughter their way over like our ancestors. At that time, we will all become prey and be at their mercy. This was what Bo-Muir had told Janibek Khan and his brother Kalei. After that, some information regarding the five-star army was sent to the two of them. The strength and rise of the five-star army quickly aroused the vigilance of the two brothers. It was not easy for them to obtain their current territory. Of course, they would not allow others to seize it. In order to stabilize their forces, they quickly decided to send out their troops. Keliyai personally led 80,000 cavalrymen and followed Bo-Muir into the Ili region, directly converging with Yesen's troops. Yang Chendong did not know about any of this. Yangshi's intelligence network was indeed very powerful, but he didn't pay much attention to Kazakh, which was still very far away. In his eyes, attacking and occupying Kazakh wasn't the most important thing at the moment, so he just established a small intelligence group there. In addition, that region had always been in chaos, so the intelligence network could not be of any use. This allowed the five-star army to have an additional 220,000 cavalrymen under their noses. Moreover, they were all elite cavalrymen that no one had discovered. Just like how Yang Chendong was mobilizing his troops, the enemy was also mobilizing their troops. Everyone was not idle and was racing against time to prepare. It was as if a storm was brewing. How could Yang Chendong, who was in the Turpan Palace, not know that the enemy was also preparing for war? In particular, the emissaries from the three countries had just been chased away by him. As for the idea of compensation from the three countries, he gave the most direct rejection. In his eyes, if they surrendered now, the army could live, the people could live, and even the king could live. He would give them all the best arrangements. However, it was impossible for him to withdraw his troops. The emissaries from the three countries left with regrets. Yang Chendong knew that there was no other way but to fight. It was only a fight. Who was he afraid of? Yang Chendong had absolute confidence in the five-star army. Once the reinforcements arrived, he would have enough troops. That would be the time for him to launch an all-out attack. And just as Yang Shandong was thinking about the next military plan and which country to attack first, an urgent report suddenly appeared. The world's first cavalry division stationed at the Ala Mountain Pass sent an urgent message, and Ely suddenly sent 80,000 troops to surround them in this area. The 1st Cavalry Division could be said to be the most powerful army under Yang Shandong's command. In terms of cold weapons alone, even Lung Feng was no match for them. If even they sent an urgent message, one could imagine how bad the situation was. Young Master, according to Commander Tian Hu, they are not in any danger now, but there is no direction to break out of the encirclement. Once time passes, food will become the biggest problem. Please make a decision as soon as possible. Beta Persei, who was acting as an advisor, came to this conclusion after reading the telegram and a sand table placed in front of him. Yang Shandong supported this point of view. With the strength of the 1st Cavalry Division, it was very difficult for anyone to find trouble with them. Now that they were not breaking out of the encirclement, they were just looking for and waiting for an opportunity. Of course, it was not that the 1st Cavalry Division was not unprepared for this trip. On the contrary, they were fully prepared. Otherwise, they would not have appeared alone at the Ala Mountain Pass. If only 80,000 people wanted to find trouble with them, it would be difficult. However, if the enemy increased the number of troops, the situation would become serious. According to Tian Hu, looking for an opportunity to find the weakness of the Ely Cavalry Division that was surrounding them. Waiting was to see if Yang Shandong had a better battle plan, such as cooperating with the enemy from the inside and outside. If the 5-star army could send a large number of cavalry to support the 1st Cavalry Division, it would not be difficult to severely damage the 80,000 Ely Cavalry Division. In that case, it would be another great victory. Surrounding them, but not attacking? What are they trying to do? Although Yang Shandong agreed with Beta Persei's analysis, there were still some questions in his heart that he could not explain clearly. For example, did the Ely Cavalry Division not know that it would be easy to be attacked from both inside and outside if they only surrounded them without attacking? If they knew and still did this, then what were they relying on? Young Master, could it be that they know the power of the 1st Cavalry Division and don't want to take the initiative to attack? They want to wait for us to break out of the encirclement? After all, we are not as familiar with the local terrain as they are. Beta Persei heard Yang Shandong's doubts and expressed his thoughts again. Yang Shandong nodded after listening. We can't rule out this possibility, but we also have to guard against them having any backup plans, such as surrounding them to attack the reinforcements. Beta Persei was startled when he heard this, then said, Young Master, are you saying that they are using the 1st Cavalry Division as bait to lure us over and then block our reinforcements? Aren't they a little too bold? Is it? On the battlefield, it's either you die or I live. It's okay to be bold. Sometimes you can only achieve great things by daring to think. Yang Shandong laughed, then shook his head indifferently and said, It doesn't matter if they are plotting something or not. Since they have surrounded the 1st Cavalry Division, then we have to save them. In this case, get the Far Eastern Army's 1st Cavalry Division's division commander, Daikwa. The 1st Cavalry Division was surrounded near the Ala Mountain Pass, which was indeed Ely Cavalry Division's doing. The reason why they did this was just as Yang Shandong thought. They wanted to attract more 5-star army to appear here and then defeat them one by one. Since there was no possibility for the two sides to solve the problem through peace talks, then the only thing left was to fight. Therefore, Ely Cavalry Division was prepared to make the first move. After contacting Yarkand and Turpan, they sent 80,000 cavalrymen to block the 1st Cavalry Division at the Ala Mountain Pass. With 80,000 cavalrymen against the 16,000 soldiers of the 1st Cavalry Division, it was exactly 5 times their strength. This was the reason why Ely Cavalry Division dared to do this. They had even more confidence because of the support of the Yarkiang Kingdom, the Turpan Kingdom, and the Vala tribe. Yes, after Yesen received the support of 80,000 cavalrymen from the Kazakh Khanate, his military strength reached 220,000. This gave him the confidence to compete with Yang Shandong again. Not to mention, this time, They were in the dark, while the five-star army was in the light. And with the full support of Ely Cavalry Division, he really couldn't think of any possibility of failure. The defeat of the Allied army under the Turpan Kingdom taught the three kings a good lesson. After the incident, although they had criticized each other, the moment they sat down, the grim situation forced them to unite and fight against the five-star army. After experiencing the trauma of the war, the foundation of the alliance became firmer. After seeing the power of the five-star army, the three kingdoms started to recruit more soldiers. This wasn't just about the gains and losses of a city or a land. It involved the destruction of a country, so they couldn't help but muster up all their energy. Under the recruitment, the military strength of the three kingdoms was constantly increasing. Among them, Ely Cavalry Division recruited 100,000 soldiers, increasing their military strength to 270,000. Yarkand recruited 100,000 soldiers, increasing their military strength to 220,000. Turpan was even more impressive. They had always been hiding their soldiers among the people. This time, they recruited 150,000 soldiers, increasing their military strength to 250,000. If the 140,000 from Wara and the 80,000 from Kazakh were added, they would have another 220,000 soldiers. In total, they had nearly 1 million soldiers, and most of them were cavalrymen who were good at fighting. If it wasn't for this recruitment, the five powers wouldn't have known that they had such great power. When this number was placed in front of them, it gave them endless confidence. Otherwise, they wouldn't have dared to attack the strongest of the five-star army, the 1st Cavalry Division. Chapter 12:31. In the words of Prime Minister Apu of Ely, if they were moved, they would send out the strongest troops of the five-star army. As long as the 1st Cavalry Division was destroyed, the morale of the five-star army would be affected, and it would be time for them to counterattack. With such a consensus, Ely sent out 80,000 troops to surround the Ayla Mountain Pass. This was because the other factions were slow in deploying their troops. Otherwise, it wouldn't be 80,000 troops, but 180,000 or 280,000. Surrounding the 1st Cavalry Division was only the first step of Apu's plan. While he urged the other factions to send more troops, he was also waiting for the five-star army's response. If they wanted to break out of the encirclement, he would use his advantage in numbers to deal a heavy blow to them. On the other hand, if they decided to defend and wait for reinforcements to arrive, he would be able to use this time to dispatch more troops here and kill off the reinforcements one by one. Now that Apu had made the first move, it was time to see how the five-star army would react. He wanted to see how the famous King Wunan of Damyong would break out of this situation. Apu didn't have to wait for too long before the five-star army's reinforcements appeared. It was the Liaodong Army's 1st Cavalry Division. A total of 8,400 people rode out of the city. This scene was quickly noticed by the scouts and was reported to Apu and the other factions. They really are preparing for a middle attack. But this Bugnam of Gojoseon is looking down on someone too much. He only sent out 10,000 cavalry. Does he really think he can turn the situation around? Men, inform King Hardenbarter and ask him to make a move. After receiving the report, Apu revealed a look of understanding. In his view, Yang Shandong's move wasn't very smart. Just as a huge battle was brewing in Ely and could erupt at any time, a group of unexpected guests came to Shajing City. The reason why it was called a group was because they didn't have many people, only 6 in total. Moreover, they were all very young. None of them were over 30 years old. Some of their faces were still brimming with youthfulness. Although they were young and few in number, no one could look down on them because they were all from Crimson City. They also had an identity that countless officials and military officers feared: disciplinary investigators. The Discipline Department was a new department established by the Crimson City City Lord, Yu Qian, after consulting with Yang Shandong. The scope of its management was very similar to the Commission for Discipline and Discipline in the modern era. At the same time, it also had the power of the Military Law Department. Its full name was the Disciplinary Investigation Department. Their duty was to investigate whether any official had colluded with the enemy, betrayed the country, or violated discipline. They were different from the Ministry of Supervision and the Ministry of Anti-Corruption. The corruption and abuse of power of the officials were not within their scope of investigation. What they valued was the integrity and loyalty of the officials. It could be said that this was a department to consolidate Yang Qindong's absolute dominance. This department had just been established not too long ago. In fact, they weren't even fully staffed yet. However, they had already appeared in Shajing City. From this, it could be seen that they were going to do a big case for everyone to see. At the same time, they were also taking the opportunity to raise the prestige of their disciplinary investigation department. Unfortunately, the new Second Army became the first target of their investigation. When he received the notice from the Crimson City Lord, the commander of a new Second Army let out a long sigh. He knew that the matter of him faking his surrender was not over. Now, what should have come had finally come. When he received the news that the Disciplinary Investigation Department was coming to Shajing City, the commander of the 1st Cavalry Division, Kong Ji, came to the headquarters of the new Second Army with a face full of anger. The moment he saw Shajing, he said with a look of indignation, "General, what is this Disciplinary Investigation Department doing? Even the Bugnom of Gojoseon didn't pursue our problem. What do they want to investigate? A straight foot is not afraid of a crooked shadow. If they want to investigate, then let them. We didn't do anything wrong. What are we afraid of?" Although Shajing was also a little angry, considering that Su Yuan was recommended by him and that he really did betray him. Just based on this point, even if it was a big mistake that couldn't be remedied, it could only be investigated by others. Shajing's attitude didn't satisfy Kong Ji. He didn't come just to complain, but also to come up with an idea. "General, why don't we send a telegram to the king and tell him about this situation?" "No. The 6th young master is now fighting with Ili in the front. We can't be distracted." Shajing hurriedly waved his hand. He didn't want to trouble Yang Qindong because of his own matter. Although he was a little conflicted this time, why wouldn't he want to clear his name through this kind of investigation? Seeing that Shajing didn't agree, Kong Ji said indignantly, "But the king knows about our situation. He also said that we were wronged. We're people who have done meritorious deeds." "Okay, Mr. Kong, did you really do something wrong to the king and the 5-star army?" Shajing asked angrily when he saw that Kong Ji was still pestering him. "Of course not." Kong Ji patted his chest, looking like he didn't have to be afraid of ghosts screaming at his door if he didn't do anything wrong. Since he didn't do anything wrong, why should we be afraid of investigating? Just let them do what they want. We should still do what we should do. Shajing waved his hand as he said this, but then his tone softened a lot. Actually, this might not be a bad thing. After the investigation, there won't be any problems. Our new Second Army can be considered to have turned over a new leaf, and other people won't be able to pester us about this problem anymore. Kong Ji, who originally wanted to continue refuting, heard this last sentence. His eyes couldn't help but light up. "That's right. Anyway, we have never betrayed the king or the 5-star army. If they want to investigate, let them investigate. After this investigation, they must give us a conclusion." Seeing that Kong Ji had finally thought it through, Shajing also let out a sigh of relief. What he was most worried about was that the officers under him would be conflicted, which would affect their work. One had to know that the provisions, soldiers, and civilians that were heading to the Ili area had to pass through Shajing City. Shajing City had to receive a lot of people every day, so it was absolutely impossible to go on a business trip. "Don't worry. Castellan Yuqian has already given us an accurate answer. After this investigation, there will be a conclusion. With this conclusion, no one will talk about the new Second Army's past." Shajing calmed Kong Ji's anger, but he didn't know that some people were angry because of this. At this moment, in front of Shajing City, 6 young people were standing there. Their faces were very ugly. The leader was wearing a long robe. At this moment, he was frowning and covering his nose. From time to time, there would be civilians and soldiers entering the city. When they walked past him, they would bring different smells, which seemed to make him very annoyed. Speaking of which, he had always lived in Qiqian City. The hygiene there was excellent, and the air was good. When had he ever seen such a scene? The civilians and soldiers were rushing through the night without the conditions to take a bath, so it was reasonable that there were all kinds of smells on their bodies. This made Muda, the leader of the disciplinary investigation department, have an ugly expression. What made him even uglier was that he had already arrived at the entrance of Shajing City, but there was still no crowd to welcome him. Although Yang Chendong advocated that Yang Xie didn't like to do such things, but when he really came, there wasn't even a single person to welcome him. This made Muda angry. From his point of view, this was the new Second Army not putting him in the disciplinary investigation department in their eyes. You better not have any problems. Otherwise, I will make an example out of you. After a flash of anger passed through Muda's heart, he covered his nose again. He raised his head and waved his hand as he led his 5 team members into Shajing City. In the new Second Army's headquarters, Shajing had just met with a passing 5-star army commander. They discussed how long they would stay here and how much food they would bring with them. After that, a soldier came to report that Muda, who claimed to be from Qiqian City, had arrived at the headquarters and wanted to meet with him. From Qiqian City, and he's a leader? After Shajing heard this, he quickly understood that this must be the group that was investigating him. He immediately said, "Let's go, lead the way." In the reception room of the military headquarters, Muda and his 6 team members had already found a place to sit down. After coming here, they could finally drink tea without having to smell the unpleasant smell. The 6 of them looked much better. Thump, thump, thump. The sound of hurried footsteps came from outside the hall. Then, Shibi, who was wearing a major general's uniform, walked into everyone's line of sight. The moment they saw the major general, the young men in the hall wanted to stand up. However, when their gazes landed on their leader, Muda, they realized that he did not do anything. They could not help but put their raised butts back down. Compared to a major general, they valued the identity of their team leader more. After all, that was the person who could decide their future. Of course, Muda also saw the departure, but because he was angry that the other party did not welcome him, he wanted to show him who was the boss, so he sat down and did not move. She slowly stood up when she was about 5 steps away from him. After he entered the hall, no one paid any attention to him. His heart skipped a beat. He had a feeling that the investigation team did not come with good intentions. Because Shibi had once betrayed the 5-star army, even if it was forced by circumstances, even if it was just an act, in many people's eyes, it was a fact, a part of history. Therefore, he felt guilty and did not reject the investigation team. However, the personal guard beside him didn't think so. Seeing that the 6 guests were still so arrogant, even when the military commander was here, he couldn't help but be furious. He shouted, "The military commander is here. Don't you know how to stand up and welcome him?" Muda, who had already raised half of his buttocks, heard this and sat back down. He then said in an annoyed tone, "Oh, I didn't know that commander she was so arrogant. I say, Commander, you won't punish us for not welcoming you, right?" Chapter 1232. Step down. Shibi had a premonition that something was wrong when the guard shouted those words. Seeing that Muda was indeed angry, he hurriedly scolded the guard. Then he squeezed out a smile and took the initiative to bow and extend his right hand to Muda. "You must be team leader, Muda. As the saying goes, a slap doesn't hit a smiling face." The other party was also a major general, so Muda couldn't go too far. He stood up a little bashfully and shook Shibi's hand. "I am Muda, the team leader in charge of this investigation. And seeing that Commander Shibi is so travel-worn, you must be very busy." At this moment, Shibi didn't look travel-worn at all. He was wearing a brand new Major General's uniform and was abnormally clean. This was what he had just changed into. In his mind, since it was someone from Qixian, then it was someone from the headquarters. He should treat them well. That was why he changed into a clean set of clothes. He didn't expect that this would cause Muda to misunderstand. However, Shibi didn't know this. He thought that Muda was being polite, so he told the truth. "It's normal for me to be busy. Just now, I met with a new logistics officer of the 5th Army to discuss the matter of food. That's why I came late." Shibi was naturally telling the truth. However, in Muda's ears, it wasn't the case. A major general actually lowered himself to meet with a regimental officer. Furthermore, he was in charge of logistics. Who would believe this? Muda's first impression was that Shibi was being perfunctory. "Oh, was that Shibi was being perfunctory. Oh, so you're saying that Commander, she's really busy. A regimental officer can waste so much of your time. It seems that there will be battalion and company officers next. Does that mean that in the future, even a small soldier will need you to personally meet him?" Muda's words finally made Shibi feel that something was wrong. He originally thought that Muda was being polite. Now, it seemed that Muda was simply looking for trouble. No matter what, Shibi was still a major general. He was used to being dignified. The reason he lowered his head wasn't because of Muda, but because of City Lord Yuqian. Now that Muda didn't believe him, why should he be polite? He immediately said with a straight face, "Team Leader Muda, I don't know what you mean by this. Could it be that the commander couldn't meet the regiment commander? We are all soldiers of the 5-star army, and we are all ordinary members. In the words of the 6th young master, there is no distinction between high and low." The sudden counterattack stunned Muda. The 6th young master's words made Muda's expression turn ugly. There were not many people who could call Yang Qindong the 6th young master. Only some old Yang Xie people and some important people could call him that. For example, Muda could only be called Bugnam of Gojoseon. This was the difference between them. While Muda was still in a daze, the second wave of attacks arrived. "Leader Muda, what you said just now is just a small soldier. I don't agree with that either. The reason why the 5-star army was invincible was because of the joint efforts of countless ordinary soldiers. There are no small characters among them. So please be careful with your words." It was a slap to the face. Initially, he wanted to show off his strength to the other party, but now he was the one being taught a lesson. However, the parting words were extremely dignified and reasonable. Even if Muda wanted to refute, he couldn't. For a moment, he could only stand there with his face alternating between red and white. He knew that he would offend Team Leader Muda, but he was not afraid. He was confident that he would not be investigated. Of course, he wouldn't stick his warm face to some cold butt. He immediately turned around and left with the excuse that he was busy with work. She had only appeared for a short while before leaving. He did not even recognize the other members of the task force and did not even greet them. This angered everyone. Among them, Muda's assistant, Chong Wu, said angrily, "What was there to be proud of? Wasn't he just relying on his status as a commander? Even if you anger us, we'll still investigate you." Yes, investigate him properly. Didn't a dignified commander also do something like defecting to the enemy? At this moment, the other team members also shouted in unison. They had all grown up in Crimson City and had witnessed the process of Yang faction growing from nothing power. Because of this, they shared the glory and felt that Crimson City being where it was today was inseparable from their hard work. It could be said that these people had already tied the glory of Qiqian City to themselves. This was also the result of Yang Qindong and Yu Qian's discussion. It was to let everyone have a sense of ownership. Only then could they better protect and develop this place. Under this kind of education, it was extremely successful. Every time the news of the 5-star army's victory spread, the citizens of the city would cheer. However, if there was victory, there would be defeat. Just like when the new 2nd Army surrendered to Baiming, when this matter spread to Qiqian City, who knew how many people scolded Shi Bei for being an ingrate, and these few were among them. With preconceived notions, it would be strange if they had a good impression of Shi Bei. Even though the new 2nd Army returned to Yang Xie's embrace, in many people's eyes, it was just because they couldn't bear to part with him. Who asked Yang Xie to make the 5-star army so powerful? What else could they do if they didn't surrender? This was also the reason why the investigation team came to the new 2nd Army. Some of them suspected that Shi Bei was a disloyal person. In addition, the investigation team had just been established, and they needed to establish their authority. What could be more influential than investigating a commander? Therefore, Muda came here with the intention of finding problems and finding fault with them. This kind of nitpicking goal was not to mention that the new 2nd Army had already gone through a period of turmoil. Even if it didn't, there would still be turmoil. That was the truth. After meeting with Shi Bei on bad terms, Muda and the others began to get busy. They used their authority to find many of the new Second Army's low-ranking officers to have a heart-to-heart talk. Although it was called a heart-to-heart talk, it was actually coercion and enticement. They took the initiative to guide the results they wanted. The commander of the 1st Cavalry Division, Kong Ji, quickly found out about this matter. He originally wanted to go and tell Shiba about it, but after thinking about how his previous visit to Shiba was fruitless, he actually went straight to the 6th base in a fit of anger. He directly said that they were here to cause trouble and had a huge argument with Captain Muda. Muda was put on the spot by a division commander. In a fit of anger, he found the members of the public security in Shajing City. They had already received orders from Shajing City to cooperate with the investigation team. Immediately, a team of 20 people walked out and went to the 1st Cavalry Division's headquarters to arrest Division Commander Kong Ji. It was naturally impossible for 20 members of the public security to do as they pleased in the headquarters. As soon as they entered the headquarters, they were surrounded by the guards. All the weapons in their hands were also taken away, waiting for Division Commander Kong Ji to deal with them. To everyone's surprise, Kong Ji actually let these people go and return their weapons. Not only that, he also took the initiative to walk out of the headquarters with the 20 members of the public security. The moment he walked out of the door, he looked back at the door with a determined look in his eyes. Kong Ji was taken away in front of many officers in the headquarters. This news immediately reached Shi Bei's ears. He immediately rode to the investigation team's office. Unfortunately, he didn't even see Muda. Only his assistant, Chong Wu, stopped him. Commander Shi, Kong Ji has a big problem. He is currently under investigation. Before the problem is solved, no one is allowed to see him. Please go back. After saying this, Chong Wu immediately asked the members of the public security team to close the door and shut Shi Bei out. After being given the cold shoulder, Li Xian's face turned extremely ugly. He swayed on the horse and fainted. Fortunately, the bodyguard beside him reacted quickly and caught him. However, because of this, Li Xian still fell ill. An army's work schedule was instantly affected when both the commander and the 1st Division commander couldn't work at the same time. The most direct result was that many soldiers, civilians, and food supplies passing through Shajing City to Ili Lianli had to stop because of this. The longer they stopped, the more complicated the problem would become and harder to solve. The other officers of the new Second Army saw that the situation was getting out of hand and quickly notified the new First Army. In a sense, everyone was a military unit, but the new Second Army was under the management of the new First Army. In the headquarters of the new First Army, Tiger's Mane's face darkened when he heard about the new Second Army situation. What the hell? Don't they know what time it is? The war in Ili Lianli is at a critical time. Why do they need an investigation team? That's right, Tiger's Mane. I think these people are just here to cause trouble. The Logistics Division Commander, Yang Si, also nodded and said in agreement. He was a practical person and admired people who did things. He hated it when people stabbed people in the back. No, Shajing City is a transit battle zone. We can't let it fall into chaos. We have to send someone there to solve the problem there. Tiger's Mane shook his head and said as if he had made up his mind. Tiger's Mane, I'll go. Yang Si thought about it and took the initiative to volunteer. Most people wouldn't give face to people from Qiqian City. In the entire first city, only 3 people could give Qiqian Fu pressure. They were Tiger's Mane, Yu Mian, and Yang Si. Needless to say, Tiger's Mane was the commander of the new First Army and would soon be the commander of the new First Army. He was also Yang Qindong's study companion since he was young. No matter which identity he used, it was enough to give the people in the Qiqian City headquarters pressure. However, it was too flattering for him to meet an investigation team as Tiger's Mane, so it was not suitable. Yu Mian was Yu Qian's eldest son and was from Qiqian City. Of course, there was no problem. It was just that the literati's method of doing things was not decisive enough. What Shajing City needed now was a thunderous method to solve everything. It was not suitable for him to go. Chapter 1233. In the end, only Yang Si was left. Although he was only a logistics division commander, His authority in the rear was greater than that of any army. In addition, he was a servant of the Yang family manor and was one of Yang Chendong's most trusted people. He was the most suitable person to go. Okay, you go. Investigate the matter as thoroughly as possible. As long as you don't violate discipline, you could be more decisive. Tiger's Mane hesitated for a moment before agreeing to Yang Si's request. Tiger's Mane, don't worry. I know what to do. Yang Si nodded and left the new army headquarters. He returned to the logistics division and found a few deputies to arrange a task for him. Then he set off with a small team of 50 soldiers. Shajing City. The bustling city was about to become chaotic. Facts proved that the army could not do without a leader. Without the unified management of the army commander, the other 3 division commanders found it difficult to control the situation no matter how hard they tried. Not to mention, the 3 division commanders were also angry. In their view, the investigation team was clearly looking for trouble. With such a mentality, it would be strange if they could do a good job. 4 days later, when Yang Si arrived at Shajing City, he saw carriages loaded with provisions stopped in the middle of the street, unable to advance or retreat. With so many provisions placed there, if there was chaos, it would be a big problem. Yang Si's eyes flashed with anger. He asked the staff of the new Second Army, who came to greet him. After learning the location of the investigation team, he spurred his horse and rushed straight there. The investigation team chose to work in a courtyard in the south of the city. The terrain was remote, and there were few people walking around. It was a good place for business. When Yang Si, who was dressed casually, came from afar, he saw 6 members of the Public Security Bureau standing guard at the entrance of the courtyard. Yang Si's appearance also alarmed the 6 members of the Public Security Bureau. When they saw a group of cavalry coming from afar with a murderous aura, one of them turned around and went into the courtyard to report. The other 5 assumed a defensive posture. Who? Yang Si stopped the horse and jumped down from the gate of the courtyard. He didn't even look at the 5 police officers as he strode into the courtyard. Then, 5 figures blocked his path. Who are you? This is a restricted area. No one is allowed to enter without permission. Naturally, the members of Shajing City's Public Security Bureau would not recognize the high and mighty Yang Si. However, their obstruction had infuriated Yang Si. It was said that one's subtlety gradually deepened. He could imagine the arrogance and despotism of the investigation team just by looking at these police officers. He immediately snorted coldly. Get out of my way or else. What else? Yang Si didn't say, but his bodyguards were already waving the sabers in their hands, looking like they were about to attack. Controlling hundreds of thousands of warriors from various countries and races waiting to be assigned, there were many people to choose from. Yang Si's personal guards were not ordinary people. Just the aura they exuded made the faces of the 5 members of the Public Security Bureau change drastically. Although the other party didn't make a move, they had a feeling that if these people were to make a move, they wouldn't have any power to resist. Get out of my way. Yang Si didn't give the order to make a move. After all, they were Yang Si's people. After saying this, Yang Si strode into the courtyard. He pushed with both hands, and the door opened. What he saw was Chong Wu and 20 members of the Public Security Bureau blocking his way. When he heard that someone was about to break into the courtyard, Chong Wu immediately volunteered to step forward. He was nervous and excited at the same time. He was nervous about who the intruder was and whether or not he would really go crazy and attack them. He was excited because if someone really did that, it would be a provocation to the entire disciplinary investigation department. In that case, they could take the opportunity to reorganize and no one would be able to say anything. With this thought in mind, Chong Wu asked preemptively when he saw the door being pushed open and a man in a long robe walked out. Who are you? How dare you break into the disciplinary investigation department's restricted area? Put down your weapons and surrender immediately, and you may receive lenient treatment when you are sentenced. His loud shout was quite imposing and achieved Sir's intention of seizing people. If it was a coward, they might have been scared silly by this shout. What kind of person was Yang Si? He only had one master, and that was Yang Chendong. The people he usually associated with were at the level of military advisors. Why would he care about a small fry like Chong Wu? He glanced at Chong Wu casually and asked, "You're the leader of the disciplinary investigation department?" "I'm not," Chong Wu answered instinctively, but he seemed to remember something and explained, When he heard that the other party was not the leader of the disciplinary investigation department, Yangtze immediately lost interest in the conversation and waved his hand. "Where's your leader? Take me to him." "And who the hell are you?" "Our leader is not someone you can meet just because you want to." Chong Wu was a little annoyed that he had been interrupted, so his tone became a little more serious as he spoke. He looked at Yangtze in a provocative manner. "Aha!" This time Yangtze laughed. It was just a meeting with a team leader. He really didn't take it seriously. As long as he was willing, he could even meet the head of the disciplinary investigation department, let alone the leader. His laugh was because he was amused by Chong Wu's words. However, this laugh seemed a little guilty in Chong Wu's eyes. He thought that the other party was afraid and was trying to cover it up with laughter. "Oomph. You don't have to pretend this time. I'm afraid you'll have to talk to me humbly next." While Chong Wu was still fantasizing in his heart, Yangtze spoke again. However, he had already put away his smile, and his expression became very serious. He said word by word, "Who do you think you are? Get lost." The friendly gesture that he was waiting for did not appear. Instead, he was shouted angrily. This made Chong Wu's expression change drastically. He involuntarily stretched out his right index finger and was about to curse. Before he could speak or do anything, the bodyguards brought by Yangtze moved again. One of them rushed forward and dislocated Chong Wu's chin. Then, he swallowed the words that he wanted to say. Then, one of them flashed an identity token in front of the more than 20 members of the Public Security Bureau who were making a move. "We're from the logistics division of the beginning city. We need to do something here. Get out of the way." The moment the name of the logistics division of the beginning city was revealed, the expressions of the more than 20 members of the Public Security Bureau changed drastically. Then, they obediently leaned to the side. Although the military and the Public Security Bureau did not have much interaction, and even a major general did not have any privileges in front of ordinary members of the Public Security Bureau. However, this did not mean that Yangtze did not have any. He was Yang Qindong's servant. At the same time, his logistics division was also responsible for sending backup forces to the local Public Security Bureau. For example, some young and strong men who were not selected by other armies were likely to turn around and enter the local Public Security Bureau. Some old veterans who were injured, but not very seriously, would also be sent to the Public Security Bureau. These things were all decided by the logistics division. Therefore, Yangtze could be said to be normal for them. When they thought about how even their branch chief had a smile when he saw the logistics division, they were just ordinary members. What was the big deal? They could not afford to offend such a person. Immediately, they hurriedly retreated to the side, looking as obedient as they could be. Yangtze did not look at them again. This time, he came to look for the investigation team leader. As for other things, he did not care about them. He still strode in and soon arrived at the inner courtyard. He saw an officer in a captain's uniform being interrogated in a relatively spacious hall. Perhaps because they were too focused on the interrogation, those people actually didn't notice Yangtze's arrival. Yangtze also wanted to see how the investigation team worked. He immediately waved his hand and asked the soldiers to be quiet. He stood there and watched from a distance. "Speak, Company Commander Lee. It's still the same question. When you surrendered to the Beiming Army, you had no choice. But when you turned around and surrendered to the 5-Star Army, was it also because you had no choice?" The person who was interrogating was the team leader, Muda. At this time, he was looking at the company commander named Li Yun with a serious face. To be able to become a company commander, one must have experienced life and death situations. They were all on the front lines. People like this, they were tall, short, fat, thin, and had different education levels. They might even be different races. However, they all had one thing in common, which was that they were not afraid of death. Facing the serious Muda, Li Yun's face did not have any seriousness. Instead, he laughed and said, "I say, Team Leader Li, you have asked the same question many times. I have also answered many times. At that time, Shajing City and Jingzhou City were heavily surrounded by the Baiming army. There were no reinforcements on the outside and no food on the inside. We had no choice but to feign civility and surrender to the Baiming army. However, our hearts have always been with the five-star army. It is best described as being in one's camp while our hearts are in another's camp. As for us returning to the five-star army, everyone was willing. It was also the result of everyone's wishes. What is there to be helpless about? Shut up. Hearing Li Yun still say the same thing, Muda angrily said, Company Commander Li, please face my question. I'm not answering. Li Yun's expression became more serious as expected. However, the words he said made Muda and the others quite angry. But what I said is the truth. I can't go against my conscience and say what you want. What do you mean by what we want? We are investigating the truth. Muda, who was angered by Li Yun's behavior, snorted coldly and said, Fine, since you said that you have always been loyal to the five-star army, then let me ask you, how did Captain Wu Xiaoyi die? Was it your commander who killed him personally? Chapter 1234. When it came to Wu Xiaoyi's matter, Muda obviously had some confidence. This was the truth. At that time, this guard captain rushed into the Baiming army's camp and killed a few Baiming army soldiers who bullied the civilians. How happy was that? However, after he came back, he was not treated as a hero. Instead, he was killed by Shibei. Based on this, he had reason to suspect that Shibei really wanted to join the Baiming army at that time. This matter was a clear proof. He wanted to please the Baiming army. When it came to this matter, Commander Li Yun's expression became much more respectful. That's right. Guard Captain Wu was killed by our military leader. Oh, quickly tell me, quickly record it. Seeing that Li Yun was finally going to fall into the trap, Muda's expression became a little excited. The first sentence was to encourage Li Yun, and the second sentence was to the team member who was responsible for recording beside him. Ignoring Muda's excitement, Li Yun seemed to have fallen into some kind of memory. With a solemn expression, he said, At that time, when Guard Captain Wu was killed, our brothers didn't understand. Some of them even wanted to leave the barracks. However, because the Baiming army guarded them tightly, and we didn't have a way to return to the Sure City at that time, we had to suppress this thought. However, it wasn't until later when we rebelled against the Baiming army and the military leader personally held a memorial service for Guard Captain Wu that everyone realized that it was just a show. If we didn't do this, the Baiming army wouldn't have believed us, and we wouldn't have been able to regain control of Shajing and Jingzhou City so smoothly. After saying this truthfully, Li Yun looked at Muda with a more relaxed expression. That's what happened. It turned out that we had indeed wronged the military leader. For this matter, many regimental and battalion-level officers took the initiative to apologize to the military leader. I also wanted to go, but because my rank was too low, I didn't go. Hearing that Li Yun wanted to apologize to Shibei for this matter, Muda was completely angry. No, it's not like this. The so-called memorial service is just an act of mending the pen after the sheep are lost. You were all deceived by him. They only did this because they had no other choice. She is a complete opportunist. No. Li Yun got angry when he heard someone slandering his commander. He shouted back. This matter was discussed between the commander and division commander Kong Ji. Even the deceased Captain Wu agreed to it. This matter was explained later. No. Muda shook his head crazily. How can a person be willing to die for a plan? That's just what they said. It's basically Shibei and Kong Ji's false confessions. That's the truth. You've all been deceived. With Wood's way of thinking, he could not accept the fact that someone had died in order to complete quest. Moreover, the completion rate of this quest was so low. Therefore, he would never believe that such a thing would happen. From this, he concluded that all of this was a conspiracy that Shibei and Kong Ji had discussed. Because of this, he had detained Kong Ji in order to cause chaos in Shibei's army. Now, Shibei was indeed staying at home. Although it was said that he was recuperating, according to his analysis, this was clearly a manifestation of fear. Muda was still shouting and yelling. He even wanted to force Li Yun to admit everything. As a bystander, Yang Si couldn't stand it anymore. Some people didn't understand Wu Xiaoyi's actions. However, as someone who was also from the military, he believed that when things were urgent, someone would make such a sacrifice. On the battlefield, there were many people who sacrificed themselves to save their comrades. Yang Si didn't want to see Mu De oppressing Li Yun like this. He coughed lightly and walked out. This sound also attracted everyone's attention. When Mu De realized that there were still bystanders in the courtyard, his expression darkened. He said with obvious displeasure, "Who are you? Who allowed you to be here? Where's Chang Wu? Where are the public security team members who are maintaining order? There's no need to yell. They're all outside. They've been restrained by my men," Yang Si said as he strode forward. When he heard that Yang Si had restrained Chang Wu and the others, Mu De's face flashed with anger. "Who are you? Who gave you the authority to do this? Who gave you the authority to coerce and extort confessions? Is this how the people in the disciplinary investigation department work? I'm going to ask Chief Guan Wenzheng about this. How does he teach his subordinates?" Seeing that Mu De was still putting on airs in front of him, Yang Si was also angry. This person was clearly a mad dog who would bite anyone he caught. He wouldn't let such a person get away with it. When Mu De saw that someone was quarreling with him, he wanted to refute in a fit of anger. However, when he heard the other party mention the minister's name, he was stunned. He had a feeling that the person who came this time was of high status. Mu De shut his mouth, and Yang Si ignored him. Instead, he strode into the interrogation room. First, he looked at the sign with the word interrogation hanging by the door. His right hand suddenly moved, and he pulled out his saber and slashed at it. Ding dong! The wooden sign with the word interrogation fell. Yang Si's voice rang out. "Who gave you the authority to interrogate our outstanding officers without any evidence? Let me tell you, this is only an interrogation and not an interrogation. You have to remember your authority." Under such a domineering saber, the room was so silent that one could hear a pin drop. A few members of the disciplinary investigation department stared at Yang Si with wide eyes. Obviously, they didn't expect someone to be so bold as to smash the sign in their office. Just when the room was completely silent, the company commander, named Li Yun, stood up and saluted. He asked tentatively, "You are Division Commander Yang?" "Oh, you know me?" Yang Si had a good impression of this, neither servile nor overbearing Li Yun. He smiled and replied, "It's really Division Commander Yang. I'm Li Yun, the company commander of the 2nd Battalion of the 3rd Regiment of the 2nd Cavalry Division. I've seen Division Commander Yang once from afar." As he spoke, Li Yun scratched his head embarrassedly. He probably also knew that his status was too far away from Yang Si's. "Oh, you're quite considerate. Your performance just now was not bad. You didn't embarrass the military." Yang Si looked at Li Yun and seemed to be more and more satisfied. While the two of them were still talking, Mu De's spirits rose again. He originally thought that the person who came was a big shot since he even knew the chief's name. Now that he heard Li Yun call him division commander, he was relieved. He strode forward and looked at Yang Si with an arrogant attitude and said, "So, it's Division Commander Yang. How bold of you. Not only did you dare to order us around, you even dared to destroy our office supplies. This time, you're in big trouble. Let me tell you, even if I mention our chief's name, no one can protect you." Yang Si was still puzzled. How did the other party have the guts to appear in front of him? When he heard the other party call him division commander, he came to his senses and laughed. He pointed at Mu De and said, "Oh, I'm a division commander. Can I care about these things? You can't even protect yourself. What can you care about?" Mu De looked at Yang Si with disdain. Obviously, he had already sentenced the other party to death in his heart. This time, he came under the authority of the disciplinary investigation department. He was personally reported to Bugnam of Gojoseon by the city Lord of Crimson City. With such confidence, he wasn't afraid of a small division commander. One must know that in the room over there was still a division commander with outstanding military achievements. Snobbish. In the past, Yang Si didn't have a deep understanding of this saying. Now he finally understood. He couldn't help but laugh out loud. Mu De, who was beside him, also laughed out loud. Obviously, he thought that Yang Xi's identity had been exposed by him, so he didn't know what to do. He had already decided that he would take Yang Xi down and report to the headquarters. He would convict him of contempt and provocation of the Disciplinary Investigation Department. Before taking down a division commander, taking care of a division commander was a good thing. After laughing for a while, Yang Xi suddenly stopped. He looked at Muda fiercely. He really didn't know why the Disciplinary Investigation Department would send such a person to do this. There was a saying that one could achieve anything with effort. With such a person in the Disciplinary Investigation Department, Yang Xi was really afraid that he would get into big trouble. All right, since you're not a good person, I'll take you down first. I want to see if you're clean or not. Yang Xi was completely angered by Muda. He had already made up his mind. As for whether this would offend some people, he didn't care. At most, he would ask for forgiveness from the young master. However, before Yang Xi could do anything, Muda spoke first. He said to the team members behind him, everyone saw it. This person dared to openly provoke and destroy public property of the Disciplinary Investigation Department. He's suspected of sabotaging our investigation. Shouldn't we arrest him and punish him? Yes. The members of the investigation team naturally followed Muda's lead. After all, Yang Xi's actions just now were indeed a provocative act. Good. After receiving the support of his companions, Muda shouted, "Then what are you waiting for? Hurry up and arrest him." Muda actually wanted to arrest him. Yang Xi was really stunned by this order. He didn't know what gave the other party the confidence to arrest a divisional cadre without any evidence. Could this be the prestige of the headquarters? Originally, he couldn't find a good reason. Now that Muda wanted to arrest him, it didn't matter if he took action. Even if the young master found out about this, he wasn't afraid anymore. So at this moment, instead of being angry, he laughed. He casually waved his hand and gestured to the soldiers behind him to arrest Muda. Chapter 1235. These bodyguards might not be able to out-talk the people from the investigation team, but if they were to fight, who would be their match? At that moment, the bodyguards swarmed forward, and the 5 members of the investigation team, including Mold, were crudely pressed to the ground. What are you doing? Are you trying to rebel? Muda was furious when he saw that his division commander had actually made the first move. It's not up to you to decide whether we're rebelling or not. I see that you don't have any other abilities, but you're quite good at making accusations. Men, lock them up and interrogate them properly. I want to see how clean they are. Yang Xi was also furious. This time, he wanted to investigate them properly. Since he had already made a move, he wanted to see things through to the end. He had a feeling that there must be something behind Muda, who was easily bullied and feared the strong. Yang Xi immediately took action and captured him. However, after considering some factors, he did not release Division Commander Kong Ji. Even Company Commander Li Yun was asked to stay in the courtyard and not go out. He wanted to keep the news a secret to avoid alerting the enemy. After leaving behind 30 bodyguards to interrogate Muda and the others, Yang Xi left the courtyard and brought the remaining 20 bodyguards to the Second Army's headquarters. The Second Army's headquarters was no longer as lively as it used to be. Even if some of the officers were still working, it was obvious that they were not in a good mood. They all looked absent-minded. It made sense. They were busy at the front, but someone was stabbing them in the back. If it were anyone else, they would not be in the mood to work. When Yang Xi appeared in the Second Army's headquarters, many people looked at him with hope. Some even wanted to report some of the investigation team's misdeeds. However, when they saw that Yang Xi was very anxious and only asked where the commander was, they could only suppress the anger in their hearts and did not stop him. In the backyard of the headquarters, Yang Xi saw Muda be lying on the bed and resting. She had not seen him for a while, and he seemed to have aged quite a bit. His originally black hair had also gained a bit of white. As soon as Yang Xi entered the room and saw who it was, he hurriedly got up. Yang Xi hurriedly strode over and reached out to stop him. "Commander Xi, there's no need to be so polite. If you're not feeling well, just lie down for a while." "Sigh. Actually, I'm fine physically. It's just that I'm mentally tired." Shibei spoke to Yang Xi as if he had seen his savior. He had already forgotten to be polite. Although Yang Qindong was a commander and the other party was only a division commander, the other party's surname was Yang. He was one of Yang Qindong's most trusted people. In terms of status, he, as a commander, was far inferior. The other party could become an existence that surpassed him at any time, and he knew this very well in his heart. Yang Si felt a burst of discomfort in his heart as he listened to Li Dong's words. A general who was good at war and strategizing was forced to lie in bed. This was the work of the investigation team. They really couldn't accomplish anything, but they were good at spoiling things. Commander Shi, you've been wronged. Yang Si didn't know what to say. Just one sentence was enough to make this general, who had killed in all directions on the battlefield and didn't even frown in the face of death, cry. A good man with iron bones couldn't stand being wronged the most. At this moment, Shibei seemed to have found a soulmate. He stepped forward and held Yang Si's hand tightly. Division Commander Yang, please tell the 6th young master that I've never really betrayed the 5-star army. All right, I will. I definitely will. Yang Si also replied with a face full of excitement. He deeply felt the weakness in Shibei's heart at this moment and decided to tell him a piece of good news. Commander Shi, I've already detained the people from the investigation team. After I see you, I'll send a telegram to the young master and explain the situation here in detail. Is there anything else you want to pass along? What? The people from the investigation team were detained? Shibei's face was filled with shock after hearing this. It was just an investigation team of 6 people. Of course, Shibei didn't care about them. Any random team in the new 2nd Army could easily take care of them. However, the problem was that they were sent by the headquarters. They were the orders of City Lord Yuqian. Yang Qindong also acquiesced. This gave them a lot of glory. They were like imperial envoys holding an imperial sword. No one dared to provoke them. They didn't even care about commanders and division commanders. Such people were actually detained by Yang Si. Shibei wasn't happy at this moment, but worried. He pulled Yang Si's hand and said, Division Commander Yang, I'm afraid this isn't appropriate. After all, they did find out some problems. The problem Shibei was talking about was Tan Ying, the deputy commander of the 2nd Regiment of the new 2nd Army's 1st Cavalry Division. This person was the first person the investigation team called to talk to. The facts prove that they weren't shooting at random. This person was actually Baiming's man. To be specific, he really surrendered when the new 2nd Army pretended to surrender to Baiming. He became Baiming's spy in the new 2nd Army. It was because the Disciplinary Investigation Department obtained this information that they sent the investigation team. They also obtained City Lord Yuqian's consent and Yang Qindong's acquiescence. It was also because of this that Muda dared to detain the 1st Cavalry Division's commander, Kong Ji. It was also because of this that Shibei couldn't raise his head. This was because he couldn't guarantee that there weren't any Baiming spies in the new 2nd Army. This also made the investigation team open and above board. The problem wasn't discovered by them. It was our intelligence department that obtained this clue first and then reported it to the headquarters. Then, it was handed over to the Disciplinary Investigation Department to handle. At the end of the day, Muda and the others only benefited from this information. Yes, that Tan Ying deserves to die. He actually ate our 5-star Army's food and worked for Baiming. However, this doesn't mean that the other officers are the same. We can't spoil the whole pot of soup because of a piece of rat **T. Don't worry, I know how to report this to the young master. Yang Si said seriously. These words were said with reluctance, and he kept nodding his head. Obviously, he agreed with this statement. Seeing that Shibei agreed with his opinion, Yang Si hesitated for a moment before saying, But Commander Shi, after Tan Ying's incident, we still have to investigate. My opinion is that we can transfer the new 2nd Army's officers in batches. After we confirm that there are no problems, we can arrange for them to be transferred to new positions. This was the main reason why Yang Si had come to look for other people. No matter what, Shibei was still the commander of the new 2nd Army. If they were to move her officers, and it was a big move, it was reasonable for them to inform her first. Of course, we won't move the main officers. We also won't move those officers who have already been checked and confirmed that there are no problems. Yang Si was afraid that Shi Bei wouldn't understand, so he made a promise overnight. They could move the officers, but they couldn't move too many of them. Otherwise, it would really hurt the new Second Army's foundation. Yang Si wanted to continue explaining because he wanted to lower Shi Bei's guard. If even the commander couldn't figure it out, then the new Second Army's ability to work would definitely drop. What Yang Si didn't expect was that right after he finished speaking, Shi Bei already nodded in agreement before he could even say some comforting words. Division Commander Yang Si, I wholeheartedly agree with this matter. After going through this crisis, the new Second Army can't be messed up anymore. The headquarters is willing to screen them for us. This will save us a lot of work. Shi Bei actually agreed. Yang Si said, somewhat embarrassedly, Commander Shi, these are your heartfelt words. You can't let your emotions affect your decisions. Of course they are heartfelt words. First, there was Su Yuan in the new Second Army, and now there's Tanning. To be honest, I'm almost too ashamed to face anyone. If the headquarters can investigate the background of these officers, it's of course a good thing for the new Second Army's combat power. All right, I have one more request. Sure enough, Shi Bei still had a backup plan. Yang Si didn't immediately agree. Instead, he said with a smile, Commander Shi, there are no outsiders here. Just say what you want. Then I'll say it. I only have one request. Can you let the new Second Army participate in the war? Only in war can we quickly gather people's hearts. Shi Bei said with a face full of hope. He stared at Yang Si's eyes fiercely. Hearing that he wanted to participate in the war, Yang Si shook his head. He could understand Shi Bei's feelings, but such a big matter was far from being decided by him. The most important thing was that now the new Second Army's problem hadn't been thoroughly investigated. No one would be at ease to let such an army rush to the front line. If there was a betrayal before the battle, wouldn't it really cost people's lives? Yang Si had such a thought in his mind, but some words couldn't be said like this. He found an excuse and said, I'm afraid this matter is not easy to handle. Commander, she is also a person who has fought in wars. You should know the importance of logistics and provisions. Right now, Shajing and Jingzhou are the main transit points for logistical supplies. Your new Second Army is very familiar with the situation here. If another army were to take over, I'm afraid it would be very easy for problems to arise. Of course, this was a reason. Shi Bei could understand the meaning behind these words. In fact, when he made the request, he didn't have much confidence. He said these words to prove his determination. Yang Si immediately rejected, and Shi Bei didn't mention it again. No matter what, the investigation team's people were detained, which was a good thing for the new Second Army. This was because the investigation team was clearly biased. Under the preconceived idea that everyone had problems, it was quite difficult for them to deal with the new Second Army's problem fairly. After comforting Shi Bei also promised that she would throw herself into work with a new attitude as soon as possible. Yang Si left the new Second Army's military headquarters. At the entrance of the military headquarters, he saw the soldiers he brought with him. Master, the interrogation results are out. There's indeed a problem with Muda. Let's go back and talk. Hearing that the results were out so quickly, Yang Si was also very surprised. He didn't know that in front of the fierce and murderous soldiers, Muda, who only knew how to talk big but was very afraid of death, couldn't last more than a few rounds. Chapter 1236. In the royal palace of Turpan, Yang Qindong was looking at the military situation map in front of the sand table. Beta Persei came to his side and whispered, Young master, Yang Si sent an urgent message. It's about the disciplinary investigation department. Urgent? Yang Qindong slowly turned around when he heard this. Something big must have happened to be able to add the word urgent before the telegram. Yes, this is the content of the telegram, Beta Persei said as he respectfully handed the telegram he had just received to Yang Qindong. Although Beta Persei and Yang Si had a good relationship, but if it wasn't for the urgency of the matter, he wouldn't dare to disturb Yang Qindong, who was thinking about military combat plans. To be able to do this, it could only prove one thing, that something big had happened. Yang Qindong took the telegram, and after the time it took to drink a cup of tea, the telegram was fiercely thrown to the ground. What does this Meng Ziliao want to do? Does he want to disrupt the morale of my army? The so-called Meng Ziliao was the vice minister of the Disciplinary Investigation Department, second only to Chief Guan Wenjing. Because he was very filial, learned a lot of literature, and wrote good essays, he was valued by Yu Qian and several other officials in Qiqin City. After a period of experience in other departments, they found that he was a talent, and this time, they recommended him to be the first vice minister of the Disciplinary Investigation Department. It could be said that he held great power and reached the sky in one step. From this point, it could also be seen that Confucianism still had a deep influence on Yu Qian and others, and this was also unchangeable. After all, how could something that had been passed down for thousands of years be changed just like that? But this person, because he was too filial, this time he actually used his power for personal gain and helped his elder brother, the vice minister of the Army Staff Division, Meng Ziliao. It was said that Meng Zitong was also a capable person. He had a good grasp of the battle situation and had a good view of the overall situation. He had once been praised by Lung Song, the deputy commander of the army headquarters. He had also been recommended to Yang Qindong more than once. However, Yang Qindong considered that this person did not have any experience in leading troops. Everything he learned was just theory. Hence, he did not give him any important tasks, citing that there was no suitable position. Of course, Meng Zedong didn't know that this was Yang Qindong's excuse. He thought that there was really no suitable position. Therefore, he had been waiting. This time, the five-star army had consecutively established the 5 new armies, the first army and the second army in the primordial city. All of a sudden, there were 3 vacancies for commanders, so he had no choice but to consider it. For this reason, he pestered Lung Song every day and basically obtained his support. Meng Zedong never expected that Yang Qindong would have the final say in this matter. Other than some division commanders, deputy division commanders, and regimental commanders who were transferred from the army headquarters, the 3 corps commanders were all personally appointed by him. This made Meng Zedong very disappointed. Originally, there should have been a position for him among the 3 corps commanders. This huge contrast from hope to disappointment made him unable to bear it. However, what made him even more disappointed was that the 3 corps commanders in the new army that was about to be established would also be selected from the current division commanders. This made him unable to see the future for a while. When he returned home, he sighed because of this. All of this was seen by his younger brother, Meng Zitong. This Meng Zitong, who was extremely filial to his parents and had deep feelings for his elder brother, after a psychological struggle, set his goal on the position of the new Second Army's commander. Wasn't there no problem? Then he would use his authority to create a position. As long as he was willing to step down, the position of the corps commander would be vacant. Considering that there was such a big problem with the new Second Army, it should not be internally elected. The possibility of external transfer was very high. In this way, wouldn't his elder brother have hope? In order to complete this matter, Meng Zitong sent his trusted aides, Muda and Chang Wu, to be the leader and deputy leader of the investigation team respectively. The reason why he sent out 2 people at once was probably because one of them did not do his best and the other could be a substitute. However, he did not expect that because he sent out 2 people, Chang Wu would be the first to confess when faced with Yang Xi's personal interrogation. Then, under pressure, Muda repeated Meng Zitong's instructions to him. That was the main content of the telegram. Yang Xi was very sensible. He only described the process of the matter and did not make any suggestions on how to deal with it. Even so, Yang Qindong was burning with anger. The reason why he agreed to the investigation team's investigation in the new Second Army was because of Su Yuan and Now Tanning. Yang Qindong did not want any traitors in the army. He still needed to be on guard when fighting against external forces. In addition, Yu Qian was the one who suggested it, so he did not refuse. Now, it seemed that some people had taken advantage of the loophole. Did they really think that he was so easy to use? Yang Fadian. Yang Qindong's face was filled with anger, and his eyes flashed with anger. Telegram Yang Wu and ask him to investigate this matter secretly. If it's true, send Meng Zitong and Meng Zitong to prison for abusing their power for personal gain and convict them because of City Lord Qian. Yang Qindong's voice carried a trace of viciousness. It was true that these two people were talented. Once they were used well, they might be able to do a lot of work or even big things. However, this could not be the reason why they could use their power for personal gain. He wanted to use this matter to tell everyone that in Yangxie and the Five-Star Army, there were many capable people, but loyalty was more important. If there was no loyalty in a selfish person in their heart, no matter how capable they were, no one would value them. Beta Persei wrote down the contents of the telegram and turned to leave. Of course, he had also heard of these two people. For example, Meng Zitong. Lung Song had once looked for Beta Persei and recommended this person. But so what if they were capable? They dared to use public power for personal gain and even wanted to frame a current army commander. Just based on this, the two of them would probably not be able to get out of prison for more than 10 or 20 years. The telegram was sent very quickly. In just 3 days, Yang Wu, who had received the order, had investigated the matter clearly. Receiving Yang Qindong's order was like receiving an imperial sword. Everything he did was green light. When the evidence was conclusive, the two brothers, Meng Zitong and Meng Zitong, were taken away from their respective offices, taking away 2 vice commanders at once, and both of them held important positions and were even blood brothers. This matter quickly caused a huge commotion in Crimson City. For this reason, after City Lord Yu Qian heard the news, he personally asked about this matter. Soon, Yang Wu went to meet Yu Qian, Lung Song, and the others respectively. When he left, these people who were found were all covered in cold sweat. They had actually used their power for personal gain to this extent. They actually wanted to frame a military commander in public, and a military commander who had performed meritorious deeds. Whether it was Yu Qian, Lung Song, or the others, they were all covered in cold sweat. These two people were recommended by them. More importantly, from the beginning of the investigation until the arrest of this matter, no one had informed them. What did this prove? Yang Qindong was already very dissatisfied with this matter. This was what made them feel afraid. Immediately, Yu Qian and the others quickly wrote a letter of apology and sent it to Yang Qindong in the form of a telegram. In this regard, Yang Qindong did not reply and acted as if this matter had never happened. The reason why he did this was because Yang Wu had called and said that this matter was completely the fault of the Meng brothers. City Lord Yu Qian and the others had no idea at all. In the end, they were just being used by others. Since that was the case, why would Yang Qindong reply? Not replying was also a kind of attitude. Think about it yourselves. The matter was handled so badly. The most important thing to consider was how to correct it in the future. When this matter was revealed, those who knew the inside story were in an uproar, especially those who were arrogant because of their talents. They even tucked their tails between their legs. Who said that you had to be valued by others just because you were talented? Once you did something wrong, the building would collapse in an instant. This rang the alarm bell for many people. It also made the atmosphere between the various departments in Crimson City correct. Things like private power being used in public were naturally reduced by a lot. The strategy of making a show of the mountain to scare the tiger was very effective. Since there was a problem with Muda's investigation team, as the chief, Guan Wanzheng, quickly sent a new investigation team. This time, there were more than 30 members in the investigation team. They did things according to the principles of openness and fairness. Soon, the new Second Army was on the right track after changing a batch of officers. After the investigation team concluded that there was no problem, Kong Ji was acquitted and restored to his position. There was also the company commander, Li Yun. Just like his name, his luck was good. He was actually chosen by Yang Si and transferred to the logistics division as an advisor. It could be imagined that after a period of experience, it was likely that he would be able to amaze the world with a single brilliant feat when he was sent out. The new Second Army resumed its normal order. More and more troops, civilians, and provisions were transported from here to Ely. The war was about to begin. Ala Mountain Pass. After the 1st Cavalry Division, led by Dai Qua, left Turpan City, They rushed towards their destination. Not long after he set off, 30,000 cavalrymen also came out of Ely City. They were Tushi's troops who were responsible for watching the 1st Cavalry Division under the order of King Hardenbarter. Tushi was a general of the younger generation of Torpon. Because he was chosen by King Hardenbarter, he was promoted from an ordinary commander who led thousands of troops to a general who led 30,000 cavalrymen. For a moment, he was full of pride and confidence for the future. As soon as he sent out a division, the other side sent out 3 times the number of troops to follow closely behind. When the news was reported to Yang Shindong, his eyes showed an expression of as expected. Yang Shindong had considered 3 solutions for the main force of the 1st Cavalry Division being surrounded at the Ala Mountain Pass. First, use the 1st Cavalry Division as a bait to attract more enemies, and finally have a decisive battle in the middle. Second, let the 1st Cavalry Division break out of the encirclement. Presumably, with their strength and preparation, 4 times the number of enemies really couldn't do anything to them. Then they would look for an opportunity to fight again. Third, no matter what, gather a large number of troops and continue to attack. Besieging Wei to save Zhao would naturally solve the problem of the 1st Cavalry Division being surrounded. Chapter 1237. The 3 plans constantly lingered in Yang Shindong's mind, but in the end, he still chose the 1st plan. The 2nd plan was a passive defense, which was not what Yang Shindong liked. The 3rd plan was a little too risky, especially when the reinforcements were still on the way and had yet to arrive. It was a little rash. Only the 2nd plan required a certain amount of time to prepare. He could take the opportunity to wait for more reinforcements to appear and fight a big battle. Just like how Yang Shindong didn't know that Kazakh had dispatched 80,000 cavalry, his enemies also didn't know that there were 3 5-star army reinforcements coming to Ely County. Send a signal to Commander Daikwa. Tell him to slow down and delay for some time. At the same time, order the reconnaissance group and the light cavalry to set off. I want to see how many troops they will send. Yang Shindong slammed his right fist on the sand table and said in a firm tone. After the order was issued, Ding Shan led the reconnaissance group, and Ma Xiangshan led the light cavalry, a total of 10,000 cavalry, to Lufan City. As soon as the news came out, General Aleifu of the Yarkiang tribe also led 30,000 cavalry to follow. It was the same as the 1st Cavalry Division that followed Daiko before. 3 times the number of troops surrounded them. Interesting. Looking at the 3 times the number of troops, Yang Shindong smiled and looked at Beta Persei and said, Suhi's new army should have rested enough. Send them out. I want to see if they can send 100,000 troops. After the order was issued, the new army under the leadership of Commander Su went out. As if to confirm Yang Shindong's words, the Walla cavalry suddenly sent 100,000 troops, led by one of the 4 remaining generals, Bomur, and followed. Oh, I almost forgot about my old friend Yesen. Yang Shindong immediately laughed when he heard the news. Then he narrowed his eyes and said, Send a message to the commander of the 1st Army, Su Ke. Tell him to attack the Walla army directly from behind and find an opportunity to destroy the enemy. On the current battlefield, it seemed that the anti-5-star Army Alliance had the upper hand. They had 240,000 troops. On the other hand, the 5-star Army only had about 70,000 soldiers. This 3 times the number of the 5-star Army seemed to be enough to defeat the 5-star Army. However, once the 1st Army joined the battle, they would have 30,000 soldiers. Then the 2nd Army and the 5-star armies would add up to another 70,000 soldiers. In total, they had 100,000 soldiers. The difference in military strength would be from 240,000 to 170,000. There would only be a difference of 70,000 people. Most of the soldiers on his side were veterans, while the other side had many new recruits. With the combat strength of the 5-star soldiers, this was no longer a problem. If they could heavily injure the 240,000 enemy troops, they would be able to destroy at least a third of the enemy's army. Yang Shindong had his own plans, but what he didn't know was that the enemy also had their own plans. Their target was him, the founder of the Yangtze Empire, the soul of the Five-Star Army, and the Bugnam of Gojoseon of the Great Ming Dynasty. They would use the 1st Cavalry Division at the Ala Mountain Pass as a gap to surround them. Then, they would lure in a large portion of the Five-Star Army's main force and destroy them. They would be the first target of the anti-Five-Star Army alliance. Since there was a first, there would be a second. The second was to surround the Turpan Empire's capital, where Yangchendong was. In order to achieve this goal, Lily, Turpan, and Yarkyang would each send out 20,000 troops. Yesen would send out 40,000 troops, which was all of his remaining troops. Adding on the 80,000 troops from the Kazakh army, they had a total of 180,000 people. They were only attacking a single capital, so they were filled with confidence. The Five-Star Army sending out their troops did not surprise Yesen and the others. In their eyes, it would be strange if Yangchendong didn't send out his troops. After all, the 1st Cavalry Division was the elite force of the Five-Star Army. They couldn't just watch and do nothing. With their advantage in numbers, as long as the Five-Star Army sent out reinforcements, Lily and the others would send out 3 times the number of reinforcements. At the same time, the Dar plan was to take advantage of the fact that Turpan City did not have enough troops to attack. If they could take down Yangchendong, the Five-Star Army would be torn apart. In order to complete this plan, Yesen was going all out. Not only did he send out all of his 140,000 cavalry, but he also used the 100 cannons that he had bought from Baiming. In short, he wanted Yangchendong to die. A mountain could not accommodate 2 tigers. There could only be 1 king on the grasslands. In Yesen's eyes, Yangchendong was the biggest obstacle to him becoming the king. What he needed to do now was to kill this person who was the biggest threat to him. After that, he would regain his position as the overlord of the grasslands. Turpan City. A large number of the Five-Star Army was sent out. Until now, Yangchendong only had the 20,000 Mongol army and the 2,000 Black Cavalry by his side. Alright, there was also the 4th Division, who was escorting a large number of rations and other military resources to Turpan City. The reason why he did not send Narasong out was because this cavalry was made up of various Mongol tribes. Although there were many of them, their combat strength was a level lower. Such a cavalry force would not have a problem winning a battle. However, once they were surrounded, it would be difficult for them to form an independent army. If they were sent out and surrounded, it would be very dangerous. They would be the first army to be attacked by the enemy. Yangchendong didn't want Narasong's 20,000 cavalrymen to fall into the danger of being surrounded and killed. Moreover, they hadn't occupied Lufan City for a long time, so the city still needed to be stabilized. The security of the 200,000 people in the city also needed someone to stay behind and manage. The ones left behind were not the strongest. Yangchendong didn't want them to charge into battle with the enemy, but they could still be used to maintain order in the city and manage the ordinary people. It had to be said that in a foreign land, they could not unleash the full strength of the Five-Star Army. Just managing the hearts of the people required a lot of effort. When Yangchendong did not want Narasong's 20,000 Mongol cavalry to be surrounded, they were still surrounded. Moreover, they were surrounded along with Yangchendong. The news came from the Security Bureau and the CIA. Turpan, Ely, and Yarkyang had each sent out 20,000 cavalry, and their target was Turpan City. They're finally here. Towards this news, Yangchendong was not surprised. Since he could surround Turpan City, why couldn't the enemy do the same? It was just that he did not think much of it. It was just 60,000 Mongol cavalry. How could it be so easy to take down Turpan City? Although Narasong's Mongol army was not strong, they could still defend against 60,000 Mongol cavalry. Yangchendong had never been a careless person. As a precaution, he still gave the order to the 4th Master Lu, who was rushing over to the capital of Turkmenistan, to speed up the operation and report back to him as soon as possible. Once he had the 4th Lu Division by his side, Yangchendong would not be afraid of anyone attacking the city. The telegram was sent out, and there was a reply very quickly. However, it was not good news. Commander Ling Dechong said that there were at least 40,000 Mongol cavalry around them. If not for the firearms in their hands, they would have charged over long ago. However, these Mongol cavalry still relied on the speed of their war horses and their proficient riding skills to fire arrows from time to time, slowing down the 4th Lu Division's advance. Commander Ling Dechong also said that at this rate, it would take them at least 10 days to reach Turpan City. 10 days? That's enough. Send a telegram to Commander Ling Dechong. Tell him to play it safe and not act rashly. Yang Chendong snorted. He had already guessed that the ones blocking the 4th Lu Division were Yeshin's Wara. Were they finally unable to bear it anymore? But so what if they slowed down the 4th Lu Division's advance? They were a fully equipped Mongol cavalry master, not someone that could be touched by 40,000 Mongol cavalry masters. Otherwise, they would not be able to return. As long as he defended Turpan City to the death for 10 days, once the 4th Lu Division arrived, the siege would collapse on its own. At this moment, Yang Chendong was still full of confidence, but he never expected that everything would change in the afternoon. Before the 60,000 cavalry from the other 3 countries arrived, 80,000 cavalry had already appeared outside Turpan, surrounding the city so tightly that not even a drop of water could escape. If not for the fact that Yang Chendong was cautious and gave the order to close the city gates, these 80,000 Mongol cavalry masters would have taken the opportunity to charge into the city. However, even if they did not attack immediately, the appearance of these 80,000 Mongol cavalry masters was still out of Yang Chendong's expectations. Shortly after, General Song also reported that in this short period of time, many civilians in the city had suddenly launched a counterattack against the Mongol army. Although the number of casualties was not high, it took up a lot of their energy and they were unable to fully defend the city. The civilians of Turpan City did not have the time to move out. They had only been informed of the relevant policies and laws. If not for the siege outside, these civilians might have approved of Yang Xie's actions. But now, even if they were rescued by their own people, most of them still wanted to return to Turpan City. No matter how Turpan treated them in the past, this was still their roots. Not everyone would forget about righteousness for the sake of profit. Many of them had their own standards, and many of them were unwilling to leave their homeland. Inform Commander Dao Xiao to send out his 2nd Battalion to patrol the streets. If there are any provocations, kill them. Yang Chendong's eyes flashed with anger. He was willing to think for the civilians of Turpan City, not because he was afraid of them, but because he wanted to integrate all of them. That's right, it was the integration of all races, not the unity of all races. Yang Chendong did not believe that different races could live well together without any conflicts. The only reason why they had not appeared was because the time was not right. Chapter 1238. In order to prevent future troubles and to create a harmonious environment for future generations, Yang Chendong wanted there to be only one nation and one nation in this world. When everyone was a part of it, they would forget their previous identities. After 2 or 3 generations, they would slowly get used to it. This way, the so-called differences between nations would slowly disappear. Of course, in order to achieve this, there must be a prerequisite. The farmers must have their own land, the merchants must have their own products, and the workers must have their own strength. All in all, everyone would have food to eat, everyone would have work to do, and everyone would be able to live a better life through their own efforts. Yang Chendong wanted to use his own efforts to let the citizens live a better life. Even if it was a foreign race, he would not be too prejudiced. The prerequisite was that the Han people's rights would not be harmed, and they would not be treated unfairly. In fact, they would even be treated better than others. He believed that if this continued, there would be a day when the world would belong to the Han people. However, this did not mean that he was afraid of these foreign people, especially those who opposed him. If they went overboard, he would not mind killing one as an example to others. Just like now, it was a special period. With the sudden appearance of external enemies, he would not allow any internal problems to occur. After Dao Xiao received the order, he excitedly led 1,000 black cavalry soldiers out of the palace. When they arrived on the streets, their murderous aura frightened many people. Some people who originally wanted to take advantage of the situation could not help but reveal shocked expressions. They were already considering whether it was appropriate to make a move now. However, there were always some people who did not believe in heresy. Some of them were staunch nationalists who only wanted to be Turkmen. Even if they had to die, they would die here. There were also some people who had opportunistic thoughts. They had seen how the five-star army treated the citizens. Not only did they not oppress them, they even helped the citizens. This was something that they had never seen before. Because of this, these people did not believe that the previously benevolent five-star army would suddenly turn hostile. When these two types of people gathered together, they decisively made their move when they saw the black cavalry passing through the streets in an orderly manner to restore order and security in the city. They rushed towards the black cavalry with sticks and some iron weapons. They were challenging the dignity of the five-star army and challenging Yang Qindong's bottom line. Stop! Anyone who comes within 10 meters will be killed. The awe-inspiring blade howl did not immediately give the order to kill. Instead, he gave the enemy a chance to retreat. However, such kindness was seen as weakness by some people. Some of the red-eyed people ignored Dao Zhao's warning and continued to charge forward. There were even some people shooting arrows in the dark. Obviously, they wanted to muddy the waters and fish in troubled waters to reap the benefits. Arrows pierced through the air and landed in the midst of the black cavalry. Some of the arrows even hit the bodies of the Black Knight Dragon Guards, but they were all blocked by the black armor made of fine iron that had extremely strong defensive properties. There were still people charging forward and shooting arrows. At this moment, anger flashed across Dao Zhao's face. He spat out a word, "Kill." The black cavalry, who had long been enraged and could not wait any longer, immediately drew their bows and arrows and launched a counterattack at the targets in their eyes. A series of arrows were reflected and dozens of shouts came from the darkness. Those were the people who wanted to shoot arrows. Cries of agony rang out on the streets. Over 60 bandits with various weapons had been shot by arrows, and there were still some who had not died. At this moment, loud cries of pain came from their mouths. The black cavalry retaliated. The moment they attacked, it was like a thunderbolt. They did not have the slightest intention of holding back. This scene frightened many people. Human nature was often like this. The more you retreated, the more they would think that you were weak and easy to bully. They would then become even more vicious and act like an evil person. On the other hand, once you acted tough, they would feel fear from the bottom of their hearts. At this time, they would become docile sheep, waiting to be slaughtered and dealt with. The black cavalry's sudden counterattack obviously had the effect of the latter. In an instant, many people shut their mouths. Many people in the dark put down their weapons. They were shocked and frightened by such a decisive action. Patrol the streets in groups of 50. If there are similar cases, kill. Dao Zhao's eyes did not show any signs of weakness. He knew that blindly killing would not solve the problem. However, there were times when showing off one's fists was very effective. Just like now, everyone was looking at him in shock. The murderous aura that he had felt before had subconsciously lessened. This was the benefit of killing to stop killing. After the order was given, groups of black cavalry instantly went far away and headed to other nearby streets. To be able to become the capital of Tulyufan, the city was not small. The places that they needed to patrol were also very wide. Dao Xiao did not leave. Instead, he stayed with a group of 50 people. Behind them were the Mongolian cavalry and some Tulyufan youths who had volunteered to join the five-star army. They were busy clearing the streets. It was just like how there had been traitors in China. There were people who lowered their heads to the strong everywhere. Although these people did not have any backbone, wasn't this what Yang Qindong needed? The appearance of the second group of black cavalry instantly suppressed the chaos in Tulyufan's capital. Occasionally, there were some who managed to escape. However, at this moment, they could only hide in dark corners and did not dare to do anything. After the internal problems were dealt with, the next step was to deal with the external enemies. Very soon, a piece of news reached Yang Qindong's ears. Apart from the 20,000 Walla cavalry that was personally led by Yesen, there were 60,000 cavalry that belonged to the Kazakh Khanate. Of course, Yang Shindong was not unfamiliar with the Kazakh Khanate. After all, this was the next place that he wanted to conquer. From the information that the intelligence department had sent over, the Kazakh Khanate was currently at war and had not been completely unified. Now, it seemed that the intelligence was lagging behind. Speaking of which, this could not be blamed on the intelligence department. Yang Shindong's speed in conquering the Kazakh Khanate had greatly exceeded the expectations of many people. It was the same for the intelligence department. They had only been established for less than 10 years and did not have a strong foundation. Furthermore, the Kazakh Khanate was simply too far away from Yangtze's sphere of influence. No one had thought that they would meet in such a short period of time and even go to war. Naturally, the intelligence department there was limited, so it was normal that they did not send back any timely information. Looks like this Yesen is becoming more and more mature. Yang Shindong's reaction was so fast that he instantly thought of a lot of things, including the fact that the 1st Cavalry Division was surrounded by a large number of troops. It must have been planned a long time ago. One part of the plan was to kill him. 80,000 cavalry surrounded the city, but he only had 20,000 B-class troops and 2,000 black cavalry troops. But in the end, the number was still too small. Now, he had to face 80,000 cavalry, and then there would be the support of 60,000 cavalry from the other 3 countries. The situation was very bad, no matter how he looked at it. Young Master immediately sent a report to the new army and asked Commander Suhi to lead the troops back. Beta Persei also felt an unprecedented tension and could not help but give an idea. No, Yang Shindong shook his head. He also thought of this method just now, but then he rejected it. Since he could think of it, how could the enemy not think of it? They had also sent out 100,000 Walla soldiers, but they were right behind the new 3rd Army. If they were to turn back at this time, a bloody battle would be inevitable. Although the new army's strength was not bad, the 100,000 Walla army were also elite cavalry. With 3 times the number difference, it would not be easy to deal with them. If they were not careful, they would be surrounded and eaten. Seeing that Yang Shindong rejected the suggestion, Beta Persei said anxiously, "Then send a signal to the commander of the 4th Division and ask him to speed up the march and come back as reinforcements." No, Yang Shindong rejected again. The 4th Division had the heavy responsibility of escorting the provisions. There were a total of 1,000 carriages of military supplies, all of which were needed by the 5-star army when they ventured deep into the inner regions in the future. There was no room for any mishaps. Otherwise, the soldiers would have no food and no pay. How could such an army display their fighting strength? This would not do, that would not do. For a moment, Beta Persei was anxious. His mission was to protect Yang Shindong's safety. He did not dare to imagine what would happen if something happened to the young master. He was afraid that even if he did not blame himself, the other brothers would take his life. Seeing that things were not going well, he could only take a step back and say, "Young master, then we will give up on the capital of Turpan. While the encirclement is not fully formed yet, our 2,000 black cavalry will protect you and open a bloody path." No, right now, a lot of provisions and gold and silver have been hoarded in the capital. Although most of these were left behind by Hardenbarter when he escaped, they are now in our hands. These things are ours. We can't hand them over. After Yang Shindong rejected the idea, Beta Persei was speechless. If it was any other time, he would inevitably say that they valued money more than their lives. Beta Persei finally stopped talking. He turned to Yang Shindong and said with a smile, "Well, you don't have to worry. The enemy hasn't attacked yet. You have to have confidence in yourself and in our warriors." Beta Persei smiled bitterly. Obviously, he thought that this was the young master's way of comforting him. With 22,000 people, he had to face 80,000, no? It was 140,000 cavalry. He really had no chance of winning. Okay, since that's the case, send a telegram to Ling Daqiang. Tell him about the situation here and ask him to send an advance march here. Well, don't forget to remind him that if anything goes wrong with the money and food, he will lose his position as a division commander. Also, don't inform the other army, division, or regimental units about the encirclement, Yang Qindong said with a very serious face. He knew too well that if he didn't say it harshly, once Ling Daqiang knew that they were in danger, he would definitely bring his army to kill them. If that was the case, the money and food would be taken advantage of by the enemy cavalry. This was something that Yang Qindong absolutely didn't want to see. Seeing that Yang Qindong had agreed, Beta Persei's face lit up with joy. After agreeing, he ran straight to the dispatch room. Chapter 1239. The 4th Division of the Lu Army. It had a total of 8,400 soldiers. However, such an army of less than 10,000 was escorting 1,000 carriages of food and fodder pulled by livestock on the land of a foreign country, and no one dared to provoke them. Just like now, they could see the silhouettes of cavalrymen in the distance, but they did not dare to get close to this army. It wasn't because of anything else, but because just 2 hours ago, a Kazakh Khanate cavalry squad of 300 intended to charge over from a relatively narrow area, but they were indeed routed 200 meters away. 200 meters was the time when the muskets showed their prowess and bows were powerless. None of the 300 cavalrymen survived, all of them killed by bullets. This scene shocked many people, and it also made the Kazakh Khanate cavalrymen cower. Of the 40,000 cavalrymen that surrounded the 4th Division, there were 20,000 Wallach cavalrymen and 20,000 Kazakh Khanate cavalrymen. However, facing the 4th Division of the Lu Army, the Wallach cavalrymen who had already suffered countless losses naturally did not dare to act rashly. Instead, it was the Kazakh Khanate cavalrymen who charged forward. In the end, they suffered a huge loss. Because of this, General Gu Lijiang had no choice but to give the order to follow from afar and not get close. The blood of the 300 corpses had not dried up yet, and with this as an example, no one dared to take the initiative to approach. This allowed the 4th Division of the Lu Army to proceed forward safely. When General Gu Lijiang saw this scene, he was furious. He went to find the general of the Wallach cavalrymen, the deputy general that Yeshen trusted a lot, Chao Lu. General Chao Lu, the 5-star Army's muskets are so powerful. What's the point of us following them? This was what Gu Lijiang could not understand. Since they could not get close, what were the 40,000 people doing here? To watch the show? If he knew this would happen, he would have followed the army to attack Turpan. That way, the siege would be faster. Compared to Gu Lijiang's dissatisfaction and impatience, Chao Lu's face was calm and unhurried. General Gu Lijiang, there's no need to be anxious. Since the leader asked us to come here, he naturally has his reasons. Don't worry, we will be needed soon. Chao Lu was right. At this moment, the temporary headquarters of the 4th Division was indeed in an uproar. Beta Persei had sent a telegram. When he found out that Turpan City was surrounded by a large number of troops and that Yang Qindong only had 20,000 Mongolian cavalry besides the 2,000 black cavalry, Dachang was shocked. He immediately ordered the commanders to come to a meeting. He even had the urge to give up everything to rescue Yang Qindong, because he knew very well that without the 6th young master, what would happen to the 5-star army in the future? The 4 regimental commanders were confused. When they arrived at the temporary headquarters, they wanted to ask what had happened. However, when they saw Division Commander Dachang's face, which was as dark as the night, they didn't dare to ask. Instead, their gazes landed on a telegram beside the table. Out of curiosity, the first commander, Gao Xiang, reached out and took the telegram. He originally thought that it wasn't important, otherwise it wouldn't have been thrown here. But when he read the contents of the telegram, his eyes widened and his breathing became heavy. "Sir, my 1st regiment requests to go to battle. What's going on?" The other 3 regiment commanders also walked over in succession, surprised by Regiment Commander Gao Xiang's reaction. However, when they all saw the contents of the telegram, they all had the same reaction. 2nd Regiment Commander He Wan, 3rd Regiment Commander Lu Zhang, and 4th Regiment Commander Yi Xingfeng all shouted in unison, Division Commander, our 2nd Regiment, 3rd Regiment, 4th Regiment, request for battle. All of you, shut up. Ling Dechong was very satisfied with his subordinates' performance, but he immediately stopped them. Now that the 6th young master is in danger, even if you request to go to battle, it won't be your turn. I've thought about it. I'll personally lead the team. When he said that he would personally lead the team, the 4 commanders were first stunned. Then they all objected in unison. No, why not? Ling Dechong had already thought of this result, but at this moment, he had already made up his mind. Even if he had to risk being punished, he wouldn't change his mind. It just won't do. The 6th young master once said that unless it's necessary, a division-level leader can't personally go to the battlefield. Although the situation is dangerous now, there's no need for you to personally lead the team. The first commander, Gao Xiang, was the first to come up with a reason to object. Compared to the other commanders, Gao Xiang, as the first commander, was undoubtedly the strongest. He was also someone who had been recognized by Yang Qindong. Just like the other commanders who could only address Yang Qindong as Bugnam of Gojoseon, but he could already be called the 6th young master. This change in address represented a difference in status. Yes, now is not the time for the survival of the 4th Division Lu, so you can't personally lead the troops. The other 3 commanders also expressed their opinions. On one hand, everyone was indeed concerned about Ling Dechong's safety, but the most important thing was that they wanted to snatch this job. Once he was going to lead the team, they naturally wouldn't have a chance. Ling Dechong was naturally aware of the thoughts of the 4 commanders under him. However, he didn't point it out. Instead, he said, "I've made up my mind, so you don't have to persuade me anymore. Of course, I still need an assistant. Which of the 4 of you is willing to go with me?" Ling Dechong had his own ideas. In the telegram, Yang Qindong said that he couldn't lose the provisions. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to be a division commander anymore. However, he didn't say that he couldn't lead the troops to save people. He took advantage of this loophole and decided to personally lead the troops. This also represented his respect and protection for Yang Qindong. Originally, the 4 commanders wanted to continue persuading Ling Dechong to let go, but now, the moment he said that he still needed an assistant, the mentality of the 4 commanders immediately changed. Even if they couldn't be the main commander, it was still an extremely honorable thing to be the assistant commander. At that moment, the 4 commanders immediately started fighting for this position. They went back and forth, talking about their own advantages and the opponent's disadvantages. It was very lively. Yang Qindong was in Turpan City, which had already been surrounded. It was extremely urgent, so Ling Dechong didn't want to listen to the commanders below continue fighting. He immediately shouted loudly, "Enough, don't say any more. How about this? I'll pick the generals. First commander, Gao Xiang." Here, when his name was called, Gao Xiang was full of energy. He was very happy, thinking that his division commander really thought the most highly of him. Gao Xiang's strength is outstanding, and he does things with ease. He will replace this division commander and continue to escort the provisions to Turpan City. 2nd Regiment will cooperate with him. 3rd and 4th Regiments will follow me to Turpan City to resolve the situation. Ling Dechong was very clear that if these people continued to argue, there would never be a result. He might as well give the order himself. Gao Xiang, who had been called out, had a happy expression. When he heard that his strength was outstanding and he did things with ease, his face bloomed into a smile. However, the next words made him freeze on the spot, as if he was struck by lightning. This shouldn't be like this, right? Didn't he already call out his name? 2nd Regiment Commander, Hewen also had an ugly expression. He didn't think that he would be left behind. His expression was bitter. Some people were happy, while others were sad. 3rd Regiment Commander Lu Zheng and 4th Regiment Commander Yi Xingfeng's faces were bright. If possible, they wanted to kiss Ling Dechong's face right now to express their excitement. Since the order had been given, naturally it couldn't be changed. Seeing that the 3rd and 4th Regiment commanders had gone to gather the troops, Ling Dechong looked at Gao Xiang and Hewen and said, "The 2 of you were left behind because I have high hopes for you. There's only one request. Even if the troops are small, the supplies are not lacking. In order to ensure the completion of the mission, I'll allow you to reach Turpan City a little later. However, the supplies cannot be lacking. Otherwise, you can just wait to become ordinary soldiers. This was the meaning of going all the way. No matter how unwilling Gao Xiang and Hewen were, they had to agree and do their best. Even if the number of troops was small, the mission was still to ensure quality and quantity. Just as the order was given, the 3rd and 4th regiments had already gathered. Every soldier brought 3 sets of ammunition to ensure that they had enough when facing the enemy. With Ling Dechang's order, the 3rd and 4th regiments, as well as the guards of the division headquarters, walked out of the 4th regiment's troops and headed towards Turpan City. At this time, under Turpan City, the 60,000 Kazakh cavalry had already surrounded the city. Kelly finally heaved a sigh of relief. He had long heard that King Wenan of Damyong had a very elite blackguard by his side. Their equipment was excellent, and their combat strength was unparalleled. If such an army suddenly charged out of the city, he really didn't have absolute confidence in stopping them. Now that the city was surrounded, the Black Guard still hadn't appeared. This made Kelly overjoyed. At the same time, he laughed heartily at the leader of the Wara, Yishin, and said, "Great, Bugnam of Gojoseon has already lost his last chance to escape. According to the Han people, he's now a turtle in a jar. Next, he's at our mercy." Yishin was also very happy. After planning for such a long time, the Kazakh cavalry that was arranged as a backup plan was finally used, and they also blocked Yang Qindong in the city, which made them see a bright future. Yishin firmly believed that as long as Yang Qindong died, no one in the Great Ming army would be his opponent. At that time, it would be time for him to dominate. Previously, he could severely injure the Great Ming Emperor Zhu Qizhen. If Yang Qindong hadn't appeared, he could have even captured him alive. He believed that he could do the same in the future. The two of them were in a very good mood. At this moment, they should be drinking horse milk and eating mutton. However, before they saw Yang Qindong's head, they suppressed their excitement and sat together to discuss what to do next. Chapter 1240. Encirclement was not the same as annihilation. As the capital of Tulyufin, the walls of Tulyufin were not short, and they were very sturdy. There were more than 20,000 soldiers in the city, which was Yang Qindong's support. The next thing they had to do was to kill their way into the city. Neither Yishin nor Kelly were fools. On the contrary, they were very shrewd. They knew very well that they had brought cavalry this time. They were not afraid of anyone charging on the grasslands, but attacking a strong city was not something they were used to. Let's wait for a while. Hardenbarter wants to take back the capital the most. Among the 20,000 troops he brought, there are 10,000 infantrymen. It's best to leave the siege to him. After some discussion, the two decided to wait. The situation on the battlefield was in front of everyone. Yang Qindong would not have any reinforcements in the short term. The closest to Tulyufin was the new army that had just left the city 2 days ago. But if they dared to return, the 100,000 Walla army behind them would tell them the serious consequences of doing so. The second was the 4th Lu Division, but it would take them 10 days to get here. With this time, they would be able to launch a fierce attack on Tulyufin. Compared to the reinforcements, the armies of the other 3 countries had already set off, especially the 20,000 soldiers of Tulyufin. Because they were the closest, they could arrive at noon tomorrow. It would only take half a day, so they could afford to wait. Both Yishin and Kelly were too smart. They were afraid that they would lose their strength in the siege. But sometimes, being too smart was not a good thing. Otherwise, there would not be the saying of being too smart for your own good. What they didn't know was that by not attacking immediately, Yang Qindong would have ample time to prepare for battle, which was very important in a siege battle. Like the enemies besieging the city, Yang Qindong's subordinates were also cavalry. They were also not good at defending a city. When Beta Persei finished sending the telegram and returned to Yang Qindong, he order people to open the treasury of the palace and take out all the silver inside. Take out the silver? All of them? Beta Persei asked, puzzled. He didn't understand. They were already surrounded, so what was the point of taking out the silver? Yes, all of them. Yang Qindong nodded heavily. This time, he wanted to see how powerful money was. With the order given, 2,000 Mongol cavalry and 500 black cavalry headed straight for the palace treasury. The treasury was opened, and a small mountain of silver appeared in front of everyone. With so much silver suddenly placed in front of them, many of the Mongol cavalry felt dizzy. All of them would never be able to earn so much silver, even if they were poor their entire lives. At that moment, their greedy gazes were fixed on the pile of silver. All right, have you seen enough? Once you've seen enough, move the silver, Beta Persei shouted. He seemed to have expected something like this to happen. The 500 black cavalry behind him acted as a supervisor. This shout instantly woke everyone up. Only then did everyone remember that there were still Azura's soldiers watching from the side. Thinking about how terrifying the black cavalry was on the battlefield, the 2,000 Mongol cavalry suppressed the excitement and greed in their hearts. One by one, they orderly placed the stacks of silver into the bags and carried them out of the treasury. Beta Persei personally went to supervise the distribution of the silver. Ba Daojiang, the deputy commander of the Black Cavalry 1st Platoon, led 200 black cavalry soldiers. They held gongs and walked on the streets. As they walked, they beat the gongs and shouted, "The chance to get rich is here for those who have the strength to do so. The good news is here. Those who want to earn big money, gather at the square in front of the palace. The chance to get rich is here for those who..." These repeated shouts followed by Daojiang and the others as they walked down the streets. After an hour, almost everyone in the city knew about this. Everyone was curious. Immediately, many people walked out of their houses and headed towards the palace. In the largest square in front of the palace, 5,000 Mongol cavalry soldiers stood around with their swords out of their sheaths. Each of them had a solemn look on their faces, giving people a feeling that strangers should not get close to them. But no matter how strong the pressure was, it still could not stop everyone from approaching the square. It was not for any other reason, but because at this time, the square was piled up with all kinds of silver. When Beta Persei was moving the silver, he roughly calculated that there was about 2 million silver in cash. From this, it seemed that King Hardenbarter left in a hurry this time. He had no choice but to leave behind so many treasures. More than 2 million silver. If it was written as a banknote of 100,000 silver, it was really nothing. Most people only saw it as a number. But now, all of them had been replaced with cash. The impact it gave off was so strong that it couldn't be mentioned in the same breath. Yang Qindong came to the square under the escort of Lone Wei's 1st Platoon Captain Chiovi. He saw the sea of people and the greedy gazes with red eyes. This result made Yang Qindong smile with satisfaction. Although the result had not been announced yet, Yang Qindong already had enough confidence because he believed in the power of money. Everyone quiet down. Yang Qindong's chi sank into his dantian. At the same time, he raised his hands and then pressed them down. Just this one action caused the originally lively square to become completely silent. Yang Qindong was very satisfied with everyone's cooperation. Riding on the white dragon, he had a warm smile on his face. His eyes wandered around the crowd, and his voice rang out again. "Hello, everyone. I am King Wenan of Damyong, and also the Heaven Khan of the Grassland." When his voice fell, the square was still silent. If it had been another occasion, in Yangtze's territory, the shouts of "Long live Bugnam of Gojoseon" and "Long live the Heaven Khan" would have shaken the heavens. Yang Qindong, who was already prepared, was not disappointed at all. After introducing himself, he continued to speak loudly. "I believe many of you already know that Turpan City has been surrounded. The people surrounding us are your former masters, the Turpan army, as well as the nearby Yilabali army, the Yarkiang army, the Walla army, and the Kazakh army. There are about 140,000 of them." Shoo! When he finished speaking, many people in the square were shocked. Although some of them knew that the city had been surrounded, they were not very clear about who the enemy was and how many of them there were. However, when they heard Yang Qindong speak in such detail, some of the braver people's faces changed drastically. There were also some citizens who were worried about the Turpan kingdom. Smiles appeared on their faces. They could finally be their own people again. There were all kinds of expressions and all kinds of thoughts. This was not beyond Yang Chendong's expectations. He had just occupied Turpan not long ago, so he didn't have much contact with the locals. The migration work had just finished in 8 Mile City, so the news had not spread to Turpan yet. It was obviously impossible for the locals to have any good impression of him. It was because he knew that it was impossible that Yang Chendong did not think of using a few words to convince them to work for him. What he really relied on was money. There are 140,000 enemies outside, and we only have 20,000 cavalry in the city. The difference is nearly 7 times. If we fight this battle, I'm afraid that we will lose and Turpan City will have to surrender. I believe that this king and everyone knows the result of this. Yang Chendong's frank words immediately received a lot of approval. It was clear that everyone knew how to calculate and knew that it would be too difficult for the latter to make a comeback. Seeing that many people nodded in agreement, Yang Chendong was satisfied, but his face showed an expression of anger as he continued to speak. Since everyone knows how to calculate this debt, how can this prince not know how to calculate it? Since we can't beat them, we could just run. Don't tell me that our 20,000 cavalry won't be able to carve out a path of blood before the enemy completes their encirclement. To be honest, this king is also a human. Like everyone else, I am afraid of death. When he said that he was just like everyone else, he was afraid of death. His words resonated with even more people. When they looked at Yang Chendong, their gazes were no longer filled with admiration, but with a sense of closeness. After all, if he was too high and mighty, it would only create distance. It was difficult for his words to truly resonate with people. The atmosphere at the scene also changed because of Yang Chendong's words. This was the result that Yang Chendong wanted, because he was about to use his trump card. Without the foreshadowing from before, the effect of this trump card would inevitably be reduced. Yes, I can leave Gigi. Seeing that everyone's attention was on him, Yang Chendong continued. In fact, I was also prepared to retreat, but a letter changed my mind. Now, the leader of the Wara Empire, Yesen, outside the city, hates me to the bone because he has lost to me many times. He wants to eat my flesh. In fact, he did eat a lot of flesh and blood on the grasslands. He even said that eating human flesh is good for his body. Hiss. When these words were heard by the commoners, many of their expressions changed. They did not expect that there would be such a cruel person in the world. Being the enemy of such a person was really a dangerous thing. After a few words, everyone had an impression of Yesen who they had never seen before. He must be a man-eating demon. It was better not to meet such a person. But at the same time, many people were interested in the letter. They wanted to hear what was written in it, that Bugnam of Gojoseon did not escape. Of course, the reason why everyone believed Yang Chendong's side of the story was because Yeshen's Wara Empire had been active in the north of Turpan many times. He was not only fierce, but also cruel. Anyway, as a former enemy, there were no good rumors about him. It was precisely because Yang Chendong understood this that he boldly thought of such a killing move this time. Chapter 1241. First, he explained the actual situation, announcing the number of enemies outside, treating everyone with sincerity. Next, he said that he was also afraid of death, trying to get closer to everyone, judging them by his own standards. Finally, he mentioned Yeshen's savagery to show everyone. Finally, in the end, he used his trump card. Yang Chendong's face was filled with anger and grief. I believe that many of you are curious as to why this king hasn't left, right? All right, this is the letter. He suddenly raised his right hand, and a piece of paper appeared in front of everyone's eyes. When everyone's gazes were focused on him, Yang Chendong took the letter and immediately read it out loud. My enemy, Bugnam of Gojoseon, I didn't think that you would finally be surrounded by me. Haha, do you know that I've never been in such a good mood? Oh, you must be very sad, very angry. But what can you do? Right now, I represent the Five Forces Alliance, with 7 times your military strength. I don't believe that you can make a comeback this time. Oh, that's right, you might be thinking of escaping. That's right, with your 20,000 cavalry, you do have the ability to do so. But don't forget, aren't you the self-proclaimed Heaven Khan, the self-proclaimed savior of the world, treating the common people extremely well? If you dare to escape this time, will you? Once my army enters the city, I will immediately slaughter everyone in the city. At that time, whether it's the elderly or the children, whether it's men or women, not a single one will be left alive. And these people's deaths are all because you fled in fear of the enemy. These mistakes will all be placed on your shoulders. This chief will also announce to the world that these people died because they submitted to you and weren't protected by you. Haha, isn't that fun? How about it? Do you still dare to run? If you run, I'll kill you. I won't go back on my word. Yang Qindong read the letter out loud, word by word. Your eternal enemy, Yes Hen, has left a letter. Yang Qindong raised his head and looked forward after the last sentence was uttered by him. At this moment, the entire square was filled with tens of thousands of citizens. However, it was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. Everyone was dumbfounded. They did not expect Yes Hen to want to kill them. He wanted to massacre the entire city. Something completely unexpected happened. Yang Qindong took out a second letter under everyone's watchful eyes. Everyone, after this prince received the news, I also sent a letter to Yes Hen. I explained to him that I may have taken over Turpan City, but not only did the people here refuse to submit to me, they even hate me to the core. Therefore, using you to threaten this prince is useless. But I didn't expect that he didn't believe me at all. Instead, he sent me a second letter. I'll read it to everyone now. My enemy, Bugnam of Gojosian, are you afraid? Do you think I will believe you? Let me tell you, the more you disassociate yourself from these lowly citizens, the more I believe that they are your people. Therefore, don't try to make me believe your words. Oh, right. Do you know why this leader didn't attack the city immediately? Haha, I'm waiting. I'm waiting for the Turpan army to appear so that they can attack the city first. I want to watch their army kill their own people. Don't worry, they will definitely listen because 4 out of the 5 countries support this move. They have no choice. I'm sure it will be very interesting. Just wait. After killing these people, you, Bugnam of Gojosian, won't be any better. Just wait for me to take your head and eat your heart and lungs. Haha. After the second letter was read, the entire square fell into a deathly silence. It was obvious that everyone was shocked by the contents of the letter at this moment. This cruel leader of the Walla actually wanted the Turpan army to slaughter them. This caused everyone's hopes of being rescued to sink to the bottom of their bones. At this moment, not only did they not hope for the Turpan army to appear, they were even afraid that they would appear in front of them. When the 2 letters were read, the reaction of the citizens was to the satisfaction of Yang Qindong. Following that, he wanted to make a request. Everyone, since this place has already been occupied by our 5-star army, the citizens here are our people. Whether you admit it or not, this prince thinks so. If you want me to abandon my people and just run away, this prince cannot do it. Therefore, I've decided to stay here and fight against the enemy with you. To tell you the truth, this prince's army is currently heading towards Turpan City. As long as we can hold on for a few days, we will be able to coordinate with the enemy and resolve the situation. When Yang Qindong said that he wouldn't give up, many people revealed moved expressions. When they heard that reinforcements were coming, many people's eyes revealed a look of hope. Only, with our 20,000 soldiers, I'm afraid that we won't be able to defend the city for a few days. Then, it will depend on everyone's strength. Of course, this prince will not force anyone. You can also choose not to contribute. I don't believe that Yes Hen will massacre the city after taking it down. But if you believe in my people, this prince's army is willing to defend the city with everyone. Do you see those silvers? Anyone who participates in defending the city will receive 1 tael of silver a day. If you kill the enemy, you will receive half a tael of silver for each person you kill. If you kill 10 people, you will receive 5 taels of silver. After the battle, you can come to the square to retrieve your own silvers. If you unfortunately die in battle, Your designated successor will receive 10 taels of silver as compensation. Remember, this prince will not force anyone. Even if you earn so much that your hands go numb and don't want to fight anymore, you can go home and rest. As for the silvers that you receive, this prince can swear in the name of the heavenly Khan that they are yours. I will not take them back, and no one will try to steal them. After finally revealing his goal, the crowd in the square immediately began to discuss. There were even quite a few people who simply stared at the silvers without moving. It was clear that they had been stimulated by this large amount of wealth. One tael of silver was roughly equivalent to 2,000 yuan. In the Ming dynasty, one tael of silver was equivalent to 1,000 copper coins and could buy 400 kilograms of rice. In the Ming dynasty, 1 kilogram was equivalent to 1.5 taels, so 1 tael of silver could buy 400 kilograms of rice. Now, the price of rice was around 4 to 5 yuan per kilogram. As long as they participated in the battle, they would receive 2,000 yuan a day. For the Turpan people who only earned a few hundred yuan a month, this was undoubtedly a large temptation. Also, even if they died in battle, their families would receive 20,000 yuan. In this era, where human lives were cheap, this already made many people speechless. The most important thing was that they could receive the money on the same day. Yang Qindong had even sworn in the name of the heavenly Khan. This was definitely a heavy oath. There was no one who didn't believe that they wouldn't be able to receive the money. Some people even began to consider how many enemies they could kill on the battlefield and how much money they could receive. Striking while the iron was hot, Yang Qindong saw that the time was ripe. He pointed to the west side of the square where there were several dozen desks and said, "Do you see that? That is the registration area. If you want to participate in the city defense battle, you can go there and receive your weapons and identity medallions. Then, you can register your information so that you can receive the fruits of your labor." When Yang Qindong's words fell, many people were moved, but no one took the initiative to step forward. It was clear that although the temptation of the silvers was great, their lives were more important. Everyone wanted to take a look. In this regard, Yang Qindong didn't care. He firmly believed that there would be people who would step forward. As long as there was a first, there would soon be a second and a third, until the supply couldn't meet the demand. Not to mention that he was already prepared. When he saw that many people were only moved but didn't take action, Yang Qindong's gaze swept to the east. The captain of the Black Cavalry, Peng Yu, nodded lightly and quietly turned to leave. Less than half an hour after Peng Yu disappeared, there was suddenly a commotion in the crowd. "We're here to sign up. I'm signing up too." And me, in a short period of time, about 50 young citizens of Turpan City walked out from the crowd one after another. With someone taking the lead, more and more young people began to sign up. When Yang Qindong saw this scene, he couldn't help but let out a long sigh of relief. He thought to himself, "Great matter is done." The first 50 people who signed up were naturally found by Peng Yu. He had already received Yang Qindong's orders and spent money to find dozens of young people from Tuliefan City who had a good impression of the 5-star army and let them act out such a show. It was said that everything was difficult at the beginning. As long as the beginning was good, Yang Qindong insisted that these young people would definitely give him a surprise. The registration was still ongoing. Yang Qindong had already left with most of the Black Cavalry. The remaining matters here would be handed over to the two captains, Qiu Vi and Dao Xiao, who would take turns to guard the silvers in the square. In November in Tuliefan, snow fell from the sky. Yang Qindong rode on the white dragon and led the Black Cavalry towards the palace. The snow fell on him, attracting the excited cry of Beta Persei beside him. "Young master, it's snowing heavily. This will be more advantageous for us to defend the city." "That's right." Yang Qindong nodded, his face brimming with a satisfied smile. Seeing that Yang Qindong was in a good mood, Beta Persei quickly asked with a learning attitude, "Young master, those 2 letters are probably fake, right?" "Oh, of course they're fake." Although that Yeshen is brutal, he wouldn't go as far as to massacre the entire city. Not to mention, there's still the Tuliefan army in the alliance. Even if he wanted to do so, he would need their consent. Yang Chandong said as if it was a natural thing, his tone as if whoever believed it was a fool. Oh, being looked down upon by the young master. Beta Persei's face flashed with embarrassment. But on the other hand, what kind of person was the young master? How could he guess his whimsical thoughts? At that moment, he thought that everything was logical. But because he knew that the letters were fake, he said worriedly, "Young master, a fake is a fake. If someone were to expose it, then..." Chapter 1242. Then what? Yang Chandong glanced at Beta Persei and asked, "What if they want to rebel?" "Haha, don't worry, they won't. As long as they take our money, they are our people. They will never betray us again." "They won't betray us if they take the money? What if they just work but don't put in any effort? Wouldn't it be better if they took the money and didn't have to take any risks?" Beta Persei looked at this problem from a most ordinary point of view. In his opinion, if he was one of them, it was very likely that he would make such a choice and decision. Work but don't put in any effort? Yang Chandong laughed as if he had heard a great joke. "Beta Persei, you still don't understand people's hearts. Come, young master, let me tell you, people are kind, but they are also jealous. Many people are kind to you because you're not much stronger than them. If one day you're too much stronger than them, kindness will turn into jealousy. At that time, they will scheme against you." Beta Persei was confused when he heard these words. He didn't understand what this matter had to do with the jealousy of people. Seeing that Beta Persei still didn't understand what he meant, Yang Chandong had to explain further. "Do you think most of them really believe those two letters? That's just an excuse to give them more reasons to take the money. Many of them even think that while they're taking the money we give them, they're thinking of ways to help the coalition army break through Turpan. This way, they can get benefits without becoming a sinner in Turpan's history." Beta Persei's expression changed when he heard this analysis. He was about to ask what to do, but then he saw Yang Chandong's confident expression and thought that even if the young master knew about it, he would still do it. It could only mean that he had already thought of a countermeasure. Sure enough, Yang Chandong's next words made Beta Persei's heart, which was already hanging high, fall back into his stomach in an instant. But do they really think that the money is so easy to take? We can give them the money, or we can take it back. There is only one condition, and that is that we are still in charge of this place. If the enemy really comes in, do you think Harden Barter will not take back the money? This is what he and his father have painstakingly accumulated for many years. Young Heir didn't say anything immediately. Instead, he seriously considered the pros and cons of the situation. Then, he patted his horse and said, "That's right. Once the Turpan army enters the city, they will definitely take back the silver. However, the people who have already taken the silver will definitely not agree. Thus, a conflict will arise." "Yes." Yang Chandong looked at Beta Persei and nodded, looking like a child who can be taught. "But this is not enough. We have to make them take this seriously, so we have to do another thing in a few days. When the time comes, you will..." Beta Persei listened carefully. After a while, he laughed. "Young master, I understand what to do. Just watch, ha-ha." "Ha-ha." Yang Chandong's laughter also spread out in the snow, drifting far, far away. Outside Turpan, a new day had already arrived. By noon, the 20,000 soldiers of the Tulyafin kingdom had already arrived outside the western city gates. Leading the army was another fierce general of the country, Jinzhou. In the army of 20,000, there were 10,000 cavalry and 10,000 infantry. Along with the army were many ladders, catapults, and other things. As soon as Jinzhou arrived, he met up with Yexian and Kellyai. After some discussion, the three of them decided to launch an attack on Turpan City immediately. "Two sirs, with my understanding of Turpan, the West Gate is undoubtedly the best place to attack. Behind here is our hinterland. Usually, there are very few people who can pose a threat to it. As long as the catapults continue to smash down, it is very likely that it will be heavily damaged and give our infantry a chance to rush up the tower. Of course, The other three gates will also be attacked at the same time, or at least it will be a feint. There are not many five-star army in the city, so we have to split up their forces and create a better opportunity to attack the city. Jin Gel concluded. Yasin and Kelly looked at each other and nodded at the same time. Okay, the West Gate will be handed over to General Jin Gel. We will take care of the other cities. Don't worry, as long as there's a chance, we will attack for real. That's great. It's already late. After we rest and prepare, we will attack the city tomorrow. In order to be in a better state and strive to take down Turpan in one go, Jin Gel decided to go back and discuss the arrangements of the troops. He wanted to enter the city in one go. It was always the darkest before dawn. Regarding the arrival of the 20,000 Turpan reinforcements at noon, it could be seen clearly from the top of the tower. They did not attack, but instead began to prepare in an orderly manner. Things like catapults and ladders had already filled a large area. With the war coming, Yang Chendong called for a military meeting with the generals of the Mongol tribes under the command of Sun Song. They arranged for the defense of the four cities. Everyone, tomorrow morning is likely to be the day when the enemy will attack the city. I want you to be 100% alert. No matter what, we can only win tomorrow's battle. We have to suppress all the enemies under the city so that they can't go up the tower. For this, even if we have to sacrifice a lot, it will be worth it. This is very important for the morale of the army. This is also very important for whether we could defend Turpan in the future. Don't worry, Heavenly Khan, we will do our best. The generals of the tribes stood up one by one and swore. They walked out of the barracks and rode back to the palace on the White Dragon. Yang Chendong had been deep in thought, which made Beta Persei, who really wanted to speak, feel uncomfortable. If you have something to say, just say it. Yang Chendong, who woke up from his thoughts, noticed Beta Persei's anxious look and asked aloud. Yes, young master. According to the numbers just now, only 500 people in the city signed up to participate in the city defense battle. Among them, there are 50 people we arranged in advance. In other words, there are more than 200,000 people in the city, of which there are more than 40,000 young men, but only about 1% of them signed up. Beta Persei had an anxious look on his face. In his opinion, this number was still too low. It was completely below his psychological bottom line. 1%? That's quite a lot. Unexpectedly, Yang Chendong was not surprised when he heard this number. On the contrary, he smiled with satisfaction. Young master, isn't this too little? Beta Persei said, unable to figure it out. It's already quite a lot. 1% of the people participated in the first battle. As long as we use it well, this number will continue to expand in the future until it reaches a level that you don't dare to think about. Well, how about this? Send an order to General Sun Song to protect these 500 people as much as possible in tomorrow's battle. Don't let them have a large number of casualties. Yes. Although he did not understand, Beta Persei still agreed. But in his heart, he did not think so. Only 500 people were going to fight, and they still needed to be protected. If that was the case, what was the use of these young people? The night passed quietly. It seemed that the heavens were taking care of the Allied forces. In the middle of the night, the snow stopped and the wind stopped as well. When the sun rose the next morning, it shone on people's bodies and warmed them. Good sign. Even the heavens are helping us. Today, we must take Turpan City and wipe away the humiliation from before. Pass down the order, beat the drums, and prepare to launch the siege. After General Jin Gel finished his breakfast, he looked up at the clear sky and was in a good mood. His heroic spirit was born. The thrilling sound of the war drums spread in all directions. The siege was about to begin. On the West Gate Tower of Turpan City, Sun Song was personally guarding it. This would be the first day of the siege, and also the most brutal day. This was the time to compete the fighting spirit and morale of both sides. There was no room for sloppiness and carelessness. Standing on the West Gate Tower, he ordered the soldiers to place the boulders, pillows, and burnt tongue oil in the designated places. After doing this, he inadvertently glanced at the 300 Turpan youths who were assigned to him and could not help but shake his head. According to the Heavenly Khan, not only could these people not be placed in the most dangerous front lines, but they also had to find a way to ensure their safety. He and Beta Persei had the same question. What was the use of letting these people come up? Boom, boom, boom. Boom, boom, boom. Before the siege began, dozens of catapults were pushed out. Huge rocks fell from the sky and continuously hit the west gate wall. Every time they hit, there would be a deafening sound, and at the same time, the horn of attack would be blown. Below the west gate tower, thousands of Turpan soldiers were carrying siege ladders in one hand and scimitars in the other. They roared as they charged forward, their momentum astonishing. Prepare the boulders. Let's give them an appetizer first. Nari Song stood between the battlements and watched as the soldiers cleaned up the debris from the boulders and the archers seized every opportunity to shoot down. Nari Song nodded in satisfaction. He wasn't frightened by the enemy's morale. This was the best performance he could give. In a battle between two sides, especially in a siege battle, the defending side had a great advantage. As long as they were well prepared and had high morale, they could often fight one against three or even more. This was also why Yang Chundong dared to stay in the city and did not lead the army to break out. A large number of Turpan infantrymen under the city walls set up ladders and charged. In the first wave of boulders rolling down, many people were injured and fell. Some people were directly hit by the boulders and many died. The first wave of boulders stopped the charge of the Turpan army, but with the second wave of 1,000 infantrymen, the situation became grim again. Chapter 1243. Let's get closer before fighting. Prepare the sleepers. Nari Song fully understood Yang Chindong's fighting style. He decided to give his opponent a chance to fight back. This feeling of being disappointed right after seeing hope is definitely very satisfying. The siege of the other three cities also continued. Compared to the West Gate, they were much more peaceful. Many times, there were even ladders set up, but not many people attacked. Their main goal was to keep the five-star army in check. The siege on the city tower had already begun. Many people in the city had nervous expressions on their faces. At this moment, they were extremely conflicted. They wanted the city gate to fall so that they could return to Turpan, but they were also worried that the Wara Wara leader, Yeshen, would really slaughter everyone in the city. Many people were at a loss for what to do. They couldn't see the light of the future, and all they could see and think was darkness. At this moment, on the official road leading from 8 Mile City to Tuliefan City, a small-scale battle was taking place. After receiving Yang Chindong's telegram, Commander Ling Dechong didn't dare to waste any time. He led the 3rd and 4th Regiment of the 4th Regiment and left. Not long after they left, they were attacked by cavalry. The soldiers of the 4th Infantry Division had no choice but to stop and get into battle formation, waiting for the enemy to arrive. But every time they stopped, the enemy cavalry in the distance would also stop. They knew the power of guns and didn't dare to get close. Their goal was to slow down the speed of the army. It was snowing heavily, and bicycles could not pass through many places. The soldiers could only carry them. This greatly affected their marching speed. Dechong saw this and was worried in his heart. The 6th young master was surrounded in Turpan. He was under attack by several times the number of soldiers. The city could be in danger at any time. He urgently needed their support. But now, not only were they unable to reach Tuliefan City ahead of time, but it seemed like they would be delayed. One could imagine how anxious Dechong was. Division leader, the soldiers are all very tired. The sky is about to turn completely dark. Let's find a place to set up camp. 3rd Commander Lu Zheng and 4th Commander Yi Xingfeng came in front of Ling Daqiang and gave their own suggestions. Ling Daqiang wanted to shake his head and say no. He wanted the soldiers to continue their journey. But when he thought about how difficult the road was to travel and how the enemy cavalry would harass them, it was very likely that chaos would ensue at night. If that were to happen, not only would they not be able to rescue Turpan, they might even lose their lives here. Even though Ling Daqiang was extremely unwilling, this was the reality. Ling Daqiang still nodded. All right, arrange for the guards to be on duty. Everyone else sees the time to eat and rest. Tomorrow, those who fight for the treasures can go further. The situation waits for no one. Understood. How could the two captains not know how critical the situation was? He immediately agreed and went down to pass on the order. Ling Daqiang, who was left behind, looked in the direction of Turpan City and sighed inwardly. Sixth young master, you must hold on. 5 li away from the fourth master Lu, Chao Lu and Gu Lijiang were warming themselves by a bonfire. The heavy snow wasn't entirely a good thing for them. At the very least, the speed of their war horses was greatly affected. It was impossible for them to quickly attack and retreat. This caused them to have no choice but to postpone their plan to harass the enemy. Of course, the heavy snow was more of a hindrance to the fourth master Lu than to them. This made them extremely happy. Haha, if this continues, we won't even need to send out our troops. We only need to follow them, and we can easily complete our mission. Gu Lijiang reached out and pulled a roasted lamb leg from the bonfire. She ate with a mouth full of oil as she spoke with a satisfied expression. That's right, the heavens are really helping us. Chao Lu also expressed his feelings. But when he thought of the previous defeats, he still spoke with a cautious tone. If there's a chance, we should still harass the enemy. No matter what, the longer we delay them, the greater our chances of victory. Don't worry. With our Kazakh cavalry taking action, taking down Turpan City is just a matter of time. Perhaps they have already taken down the city, and good news is coming to us? In comparison, Gu Lijiang was much more optimistic. Without truly fighting with the 5-star army, it was impossible to understand how powerful they were. Turpan City. After a day of attacking and defending, the sky also turned dark. The night was simply too cold, greatly hindering the soldiers' performance. Even though he was unwilling, General Jinzhel still gave the order to stop attacking the city. Within Turpan City, although the sky had already turned dark, the entire city was still brightly lit. Perhaps everyone was unable to sleep because they were in the middle of a war. Especially in the huge square in front of the palace, there was a sea of people. Looking from afar, there were shadows everywhere, and it wasn't an exaggeration to say that there were people next to people. After a day of fighting, the 500 warriors finally came down from the city walls. At this moment, everyone was waiting to see if they would be able to get their hands on the silver. In the distance, with a group of 200 black cavalry soldiers clearing the way, the 500 warriors finally appeared on the square. It must be said that these 500 people were all in different shapes and sizes. Among them, there were some who were injured, some who needed the support of others to walk, and 2 who were directly lying on a single stretcher covered with white cloth. Needless to say, they had already died in battle. All right, the battle is over. Come and receive your reward. Who is Tumu? Please come over. Beta Persei's loud voice finally had a use. Just this shout alone was enough to spread his voice far and wide. A young Turpan man, wearing temporary armor, excitedly walked out from the group of 500 warriors and came in front of Beta Persei. General, I am Tumu. Beta Persei raised his head to look at the sturdy and honest-looking young man and nodded with satisfaction. Not bad. Today you performed the best. Not only was your courage on the city walls commendable, but you also killed 4 enemies. According to the rules, participating in the battle to defend the city will earn you 1 silver per day, and killing an enemy will earn you half a silver per person. You received a total of 3 silver taels. This is for you. As soon as he finished speaking, he raised his hand, and 3 silver taels fell into the hands of the young man, named Tumu. Wow! At this moment, many of the onlookers revealed a fiery expression in their eyes. This was 3 silver taels. For many ordinary people, even if they lived frugally for a year, it would still be enough to cover their expenses. Holding such a huge sum of money, Tumu's face was filled with excitement. Since he was young, his family was poor, and he didn't have the ability to learn any skills, let alone study. Usually, he just did some manual labor. Although he worked very hard, he only earned a few copper coins a day. In a year, he might not even earn 3 silver taels. Now that he received this in just one day, of course he was excited. Thinking that with this money, he could let his parents, brother, and sister live a better life and buy a few new sets of clothes, he was even more excited. He could even imagine what kind of earth-shaking changes would happen to his family with this money. With a face full of smiles, he only came back to his senses when Beta Persei's voice echoed in his ears again. "This money is yours. You can take it. Next." "I'll wait." Tumu suddenly opened his mouth to speak. Beta Persei, who was about to call the next person, was immediately stunned. "What? Is there something else?" "Yes, General. I want to ask, can I continue to guard the city tower tomorrow?" Looking at Tumu's hopeful gaze, Beta Persei immediately smiled and said, "Of course you can. Over there is the registration area. Just sign up again. It will be the same in the future. If you want to participate in the battle the next day, you only need to sign up again." Thank you. Tumu hurriedly bowed and thanked him. Then, he took the 3 silver taels and rushed towards the registration area. This scene was seen by many people. Under the envious and jealous gazes, some people also wondered if they should also sign up. Although there were some risks, they could earn a lot. After Tumu, the 500 warriors received their rewards one after another. Although they were protected in the first battle, and most of them didn't kill the enemy at all, the 1 silver tael a day still made them very excited. Especially the 2 who died in the battle. One of them was very unlucky and was directly injured by a huge rock from the catapult. It could be said that he died in battle without even seeing the enemy's appearance clearly. But after his death, Beta Persei still gave his designated successor 10 silver taels as a settlement fee. Even after death, there was still money. Such a realistic side was placed in front of everyone. Many people were moved, seeing that almost 90% of the 500 participants went to the registration area to sign up again, and seeing that these people would take away a large amount of silver taels at this time tomorrow, some people finally couldn't help it. They seemed to be afraid that the small mountain of silver would be taken away by others, so they immediately joined the registration team. 20 tables were prepared yesterday, but there were very few participants. Today, the 20 tables were filled with people in an instant. It looked like there was not enough space at all. It would be good if they could finish recording before dawn. Beta Persei immediately made a decision. He ordered people to bring over 100 tables and arrange for some soldiers to be in charge of this matter. Only then did he relieve the pressure. With this good news, Beta Persei returned to the palace and reported the news to Yang Chendong. "Young master, good news, good news. The number of people who signed up for the battle today is about 10 times more than yesterday. It looks like there are about 5,000 people." "Is that so?" When he heard this news, Yang Chendong was not surprised at all. This was originally within his expectations. Human nature was like this. When there was good news, it would often rush forward. This was also human nature. Although he had been prepared for this for a long time, the smooth development of the matter still made Yang Chendong very happy. At this moment, he didn't seem to take the defensive battle of Turpan seriously. Instead, he put all his energy into the next battle at the Ayla Mountain Pass. Chapter 1244. With a large amount of money and weapons stored in the city, the only thing they lacked was a lack of manpower. Since the lack of soldiers was alleviated, there was nothing for him to worry about. However, the battle at the Ayla Mountain Pass involved too many forces. If the situation wasn't handled properly, the 5-star army would be defeated. Then, they would have no choice but to withdraw from this place. If they wanted to enter the Ayla Mountain Pass again, they would need a lot of time to prepare. Looking at the Ayla Mountain Pass marked with a red flag on the sand table, Yang Chendong frowned. Even the 1st Cavalry Division would not be able to break through the encirclement of 80,000 soldiers with less than 20,000 soldiers, not to mention supporting the other allies. Naturally, Yang Chendong was not worried about the 1st Cavalry Division. He had already prepared and given orders. However, it was not realistic to expect them to support the other allies. But what if another force suddenly appeared? What would it be like if they worked together with the other allies? Yang Qindong thought as he looked at Hokseri City to the north of the Ala Mountain Pass. If you remember correctly, Bai Shuang's 4th Cavalry Division was there. Perhaps Hokseri City. In the past half a month, Bai Shuang's injuries had already healed. Not only that, but he had also gained a lot of weight. This was naturally closely related to the care of his new wife, Ruofang. If there was a woman who cared about him all the time and made him nutritious meals for every meal, it would be hard for a man not to get fat. With power in his hands, in charge of the famous 4th Cavalry Division, and with a beautiful wife by his side, Bai Shuang was living a godlike life. However, his peaceful life did not extinguish his will to fight. He clearly remembered his identity, and he was even more aware that the world was not yet settled, and there were even more important missions waiting for him. "Husband, it's time to eat." Ruofang appeared in the study with delicious food in front of Bai Shuang. After the food was placed on the table, Bai Shuang reached out and held Ruofang's delicate wrist. With a gentle gaze, he said, "It's been hard on you." "It's not hard at all. I like this kind of life." Ruofang's face carried a faint smile and satisfaction. "I also like the feeling of being with you." Bai Shuang sighed. However, his expression suddenly changed as he said, "But just now, a messenger sent word that the reserve force that would replace his 4th line in Hokseri had arrived." This also indicated that his comfortable life was about to come to an end. When he thought about the main force of the division that was surrounded, White Shuang felt a heavy responsibility on his shoulders. However, before Bai Shuang could say anything, Ruofang had already opened her mouth and said, "A good man should be ambitious. My man should not only accompany his wife." The battlefield is where he can show his talent. "I know that the person who will replace my husband has come. You should do what you should do. I will also leave here and return to the first city to wait for your return." After all, she had worked for the CIA before, so she had her own sources of information. Naturally, she was very clear about what happened in Hobokseri. Because of this, she also knew that it was time for the husband and wife to separate. Originally, Ruofang was the leader of the CIA in charge of intelligence work in this area. However, because she married Bai Shuang, this responsibility naturally had to be relieved. This was also the rule that Yang Qindong had set before. If the husband and wife both worked in important departments, not only would they not be able to take care of their family, but they might also form their own forces. This was not something that Yang Qindong wanted to see. In order to prevent this from happening, the moment Ruofang married Bai Shuang, she was destined to become a woman behind a man. She was destined to be a woman who could not be seen in public anymore. "Thank you. Don't worry, I will definitely kill more enemies on the battlefield." Bai Shuang was touched by his wife's understanding. For this trust and waiting, he had to perform well. Just one night later, Bai Shuang led the 4th line of 4,000 cavalrymen and left Hobokseri without anyone knowing. Because they left in the middle of the night, no one was alerted. Even the spies in the city arranged by the 5 nations did not notice this. When they woke up the next morning, the reserve force that replaced Bai Shuang in charge of Hobokseri security was still under the banner of the 4th line. After leaving Hobokseri, Bai Shuang led the 4,000 cavalrymen across the snowy land. Their target was the 30,000 cavalrymen led by Torpan Tushi. They did not approach the 1st Cavalry Division. Instead, they chose to attack the 30,000 cavalrymen of Torpan first. This was the order that Yang Qindong gave to Bai Shuang. It was true that the 1st Cavalry Division had unparalleled battle prowess, but they were surrounded by 80,000 soldiers. Furthermore, they were under the command of the old General Teng Mushi. Even if Bai Shuang brought 4,000 cavalry with him, he would not be able to do much. The intelligence department had already reported Teng Mushi's information. He was an old man who was over 70 years old. In that era, he was definitely an old man. For Ely to send him out, it was enough to show the importance of this battle. According to the information, Teng Mushi had been idle at home due to his age and was preparing to retire. However, this time, due to the importance of this matter, not only did Prime Minister Arap personally go to invite him, even the King of Baalide personally went to invite him. It was because of Teng Mushi's appearance that Yang Qindong placed so much importance on him. It was also because he knew that Teng Mushi liked to be conservative in battle. He liked to talk about losing before he won. Yang Shandong was not worried about letting 80,000 people surround the 1st Cavalry Division. With Teng Mushi's many years of experience, he would not take risks. Unless the 1st Cavalry Division took the initiative to break out of the encirclement, the possibility of Ili attacking first was very low. Since Teng Mushi liked to play it safe, Yang Shandong allowed the 1st Cavalry Division to not move. They could also use this chance to tie down the 80,000 steel cavalry. Since they could not fight at the Ala Mountain Pass, Bai Shuang's orders were to work with Dai Qua of the Far Eastern Army's 1st Cavalry Division to deal with the 30,000 steel cavalry of Turpan. The Turpan cavalry following behind Dai Qua did not know that they had become the target of others. They continued to follow their opponents closely, watching their every move. Tushi, who was leading the troops, was already grumbling about this. Their Turpan country was strong in the past, although they were not the absolute leader of Ili and Yarqiang. In terms of military strength, who dared to say that they were better than them? But even so, when faced with the 5-star army, they had lost 2 important cities, besieged Bali and Turpan, one of which was their capital. After 2 battles, the morale of the Turpan army was low. They needed a big battle to boost their morale. This time, the Tushi general who received the military order secretly swore before setting off that he would perform well this time and become the 1st general in the Turpan kingdom to defeat a 5-star army. For this, he was confident that once they reached the agreed-upon location, he would launch a fierce attack. However, what made Tushi depressed was that his target, the Liaodong Army's 1st Cavalry Division, which he saw as a thorn in his side, was moving so slowly that he was losing his patience. If it was just moving slowly, it would be fine. However, he could not stand the fact that they kept stopping. Originally, it was only a distance of 700 li. If the cavalry traveled on foot, it would only take 2 to 3 days. However, after half a month, they had only traveled 500 li. This made Tushi wonder more than once whether the other party was here to fight a war or to go sightseeing. Did he really want to help the world's #1 cavalry division? Or was he afraid of death and did not move forward? Not knowing what the 1st Cavalry Division wanted to do, Tushi's eyes burned with anger. However, for the sake of the overall situation, he could only force himself to endure. He had no choice but to endure. Before he came, King Hadenbar had given him a strict order. Unless the 5-star army took the initiative to attack, they could not take the initiative to attack until they were near the Ala Mountain Pass. Since he could not fight, he could only follow. Thus, Tushi endured along the way. However, when they were less than 200 li from their destination, the other party stopped again. This time, they stopped for a full 3 days. This made him so depressed that he wanted to bang his head against the wall. How the hell were they here to fight? They were clearly strolling faster than him. They stopped for a full 3 days. Tushi was annoyed for 3 days. Every day, when the scout appeared, he was looking forward to the good news of the other party's departure. However, day after day, he was disappointed. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, the scout came to his tent again. He knelt on the ground and reported the battle situation. What's wrong? There's still no signs of the other party leaving? Sitting on the big chair, Tushi leaned his body sideways and looked like he was about to fall asleep. Yes, the scout answered truthfully. All right, let's scout again. The result was as expected. Tushi immediately felt bored and waved his hand to dismiss the scout. However, after the signal was made, the scout did not withdraw. Instead, he continued to kneel there. This caused Tushi to be unhappy. Why haven't you left yet? Did you discover something new? The last sentence was naturally said casually. However, he did not expect the scout to nod there. I did discover something, but I can't confirm it yet. That's why I didn't dare to report it. Hearing that there really was a new discovery, Tushi was also interested. He raised his voice. Speak, your words are innocent. The scout was waiting for this sentence. Immediately, he seemed to be much more spirited as he said, General, According to this general's observation, something important seems to have happened to this 5-star Corps cavalry. That's why they stopped moving forward. Chapter 1245. Important matter? What is it? Tushi didn't understand and asked back. Yes, I accidentally saw white silk hanging in their main tent today. The scout paused for a moment. Although he didn't have absolute confidence, he believed in the brilliance he saw at that moment. Therefore, he gritted his teeth and reported it. What? Suddenly, Tushi sat up straight, his eyes wide open. Ew. Say that again. Tushi's reaction gave the scout a fright, but he still suppressed the trembling in his heart and said, I inadvertently saw that the inside of the other side's main tent was hung with white silk. White silk, white silk. This time, he heard it clearly. Tushi fell into deep thought. From what he knew, there were only 2 places where white silk was hung. One was the place where cloth was produced, and the other was the place where people died. The first answer wouldn't appear on a battlefield. Could be the second answer. It even appeared in the main tent. Didn't this mean that the general of the 5-star army met with an accident, and it was very likely that someone died? If it was said that a general who died on the battlefield didn't know anything, it was just like how Zhu Di, the founder of the Great Ming Dynasty, died on the grasslands. After all, the conditions for marching and fighting were not very good. If one accidentally contracted a disease, it was very likely that there would be problems due to not being treated in time. Otherwise, the Han people wouldn't have said that they died before they were born. If the general of the 5-star army had died in an accident, then it would be understandable why they had to stop all the time and even stay in a place that wasn't a battlefield for 3 days. Perhaps the reason why they stopped was because the general was sick, so they had no choice but to slow down. As for why they stopped completely, wasn't it because the general was dead and there was no one to take charge of the situation? Thinking back to the information he received, the army he was following came from Liaodong, which was thousands of miles away from here. The living environment there was very different, so the probability of getting sick was naturally much higher. Only this could explain the abnormal behavior of the 5-star army these days. Ha ha ha! As if he had finally figured it out, Tushi laughed heartily. He never thought that such a good thing would fall on him. Originally, he had the advantage in terms of military strength. Now that the enemy's commander was dead, wouldn't it be a mess? If he suddenly attacked at this time, the enemy would definitely not be able to withstand a single blow, and victory would be right in front of him. At this time, Tushi was completely excited by this information that had yet to be confirmed. He was now thinking of only one thing, which was to win the battle and make a great contribution. After an unknown amount of time, Tushi finally stopped laughing. Then he looked at the scout and said, Good, good. This time, you have made a great contribution. Immediately inform the other soldiers to come here for a meeting. Seeing that Tushi seemed to have made a decision, the scout asked with a guilty conscience, General, are you going to attack? Of course. Is there any other problem? Tushi asked unhappily. No, this general was just thinking whether or not we should inform the king of such a big matter. The scout didn't dare to be completely sure of his information. If everything was fake, then wouldn't he have to bear the crime of making a false report? Inform the king? How long will this round trip take? If that's really the case, I'm afraid that the opportunity will be long gone. The 5-star army will also choose a new general to lead them. Tushi shook his head. Although he knew that making a move now would violate the orders given to him by the king, he still decided to take the risk and attack when he thought about how the king's orders were not given. All right, this general has made up his mind. Also, so what if this information is fake? We have 30,000 cavalry, and the enemy doesn't even have 10,000 men. How can they be a match for us? Quickly go and pass on the order. These words dispelled the doubts in the scout's heart. That's right, the general had 30,000 soldiers. Their military strength was 3 times that of the enemy, and they had taken the initiative to launch a sneak attack. How could they possibly win this battle? And once they won, wouldn't he also make a great contribution? At that moment, he didn't have any doubts and turned around to pass on the order. Not long after, all the junior generals arrived at the main tent. When Tushi announced that the five-star army's general had died, and the scout beside him confirmed this information with a confident tone, all the junior generals became excited. If there was a chance to win the battle, and great contributions were within reach, who would refuse? An hour later, a new and temporary plan to sneak into the camp was born. After the junior generals received the new order, they all excitedly walked out of the main tent. However, they didn't know that their every move was clearly seen by the scouts of the five-star army. Time slowly passed. Under Tushi's orders, the 30,000 cavalry ate their dinner earlier than usual and then waited for a long time for the sky to turn dark. This situation was also discovered by the scouts of the five-star army. They reported the situation back one by one. A great battle was about to break out. That night, the east wind was 4 to 5. The biting cold wind was like a knife when it blew on people's faces. When the time came, Tushi, dressed in a suit of general armor, walked out of the tent. When he felt the chill of the cold wind, he couldn't help but laugh heartily. Good, good, the heavens are helping me. This kind of wind is just right to cover our army's movements at night. I order all the generals to be merciless when they approach the enemy camp. Whoever fights the best, this general will ask for a reward in front of His Majesty. Tushi's order quickly spread throughout the army. The generals in charge of the sneak attack all revealed happy expressions. They all seemed to have seen a great merit in front of them. Sit out. With a wave of his hand, Tushi led a total of 25,000 cavalry out of the main tent. Only 5,000 cavalry were left behind to watch over the money and provisions. This was enough to prove how imperative this battle was and how confident they were. 25,000 cavalrymen were split into 5 groups, with 5,000 men in a group. This time, in order to achieve the goal of completely wiping out the five-star army, Tushi had even sent troops to surround the enemy's retreat. In short, he wanted to create a huge victory and wash away the rumors that the Turfan army was inferior to the five-star army. They walked through the snow. A large number of black figures constantly approached the 1st Cavalry Division's main camp. Even though the snow made it difficult to travel, no one retreated. Their war horses moved as fast as they could. When they were less than 5 li away from the five-star army's main camp, they still didn't see any of their own cavalry scouts. However, the army still didn't have any intention of stopping. At this time, it was like an arrow on a bow that had to be released. With the advantage in numbers, Tushi was confident that even if the enemy was prepared, the final victory would still be his. For Li, 3 li, 2 li, they could already see the tent fire in the five-star army's main camp. They could even see the silhouettes of the soldiers in the tent. Tushi shouted, "All troops charge!" Immediately, the sound of the cavalry sounded like an earthquake. Other than the 10,000 cavalry outside, the other 3 groups of 15,000 cavalry charged toward the five-star army's main camp from 3 different directions. At this moment, each of them had a ferocious expression on their faces. They waved their sabers and passed through the layers of obstacles under the snow. They surged through the tall piles of snow that the five-star army had built beforehand and charged into the main camp. When they were 100 meters away, a wave of cavalry archers shot out arrows. Immediately, some of the soldiers on the platform were hit by the arrows. They didn't have any intention of resisting. The Turpan cavalry successfully entered the five-star army's main camp. What's going on? There wasn't a trace of resistance. It also wasn't as chaotic as he imagined when the five-star army was ambushed at night. General Tushi had a bad feeling. Everything was going too smoothly. It was so smooth that it made him feel that this wasn't an enemy camp, but a dead camp. Kill. The Turpan Kiliarchs who wanted to gain merit all shouted as they charged towards the nearest five-star army's main camp. When they opened the tent with murderous looks on their faces, all they saw was an empty military camp. Of course, not all barracks were empty. For example, some barracks had some rice dummies made of grass standing there, although they were very crude. For some reason, they gave off a feeling that they were laughing at themselves for being fooled. Not good. We fell into a trap. Some of the Kiliarchs who reacted quickly realized that something was wrong and immediately retreated out of the tent. However, It was too late to leave now. Arrows covered the sky and fell like rain, landing in the middle of the Turpan cavalry who were about to retreat. Some of the arrows landed on the tents, causing a huge fire to burn. The fire borrowed the strength of the wind and instantly turned the entire camp into a sea of fire. The Turpan cavalry, who were filled with killing intent a moment ago, were like ants on a hot pan. They were instantly thrown into chaos. Shouts, howls, and even cries filled the air. At this moment, killing was the main theme, and blood was the melody. In the darkness of the night, countless five-star soldiers appeared from all directions with bows and arrows in their hands. In just 2 shots, who knew how many Turban cavalry were killed or injured, causing the enemy to fall into chaos and lose their direction of battle. Steady, steady, head to the east. There are 2 regiments of 10,000 cavalry there. Meet up with them. Knowing that he had been fooled, the Tushi general's face turned ugly, especially when he saw that many of his men had been killed in such a short period of time. He hated those bows and arrows even more. These despicable Han people are playing with fire. Immediately break out of the encirclement, regroup with the main force, and counterattack. Tushi roared angrily, but at this moment, why didn't he think about himself? Was his sneak attack really honorable? In comparison, he was just more despicable. Chapter 1246. The originally chaotic situation gradually stabilized due to Tushi's shouts. The army began to move towards the east. They wanted to join up with the 10,000 cavalrymen outside before launching a counterattack. However, they didn't know that the situation in the east wasn't any better than them. The 5,000 Turban cavalrymen who were in charge of the detour were being chased by the 5-star army. The ones chasing after them were the 1st Cavalry Division's 4th Regiment, Bai Shuang's troops. Stopping for 3 days, hanging white silk in the main tent, those were just a ploy to lure the Turban army out. From the looks of it, everything was successful. Tushi, who wanted to gain merit, didn't wait for them to reach their destination before making his move. However, the 5-star army had already expected this kind of sneak attack. After a discussion between Bai Shuang and Dai Qua, they decided to beat the enemy at their own game. The final result of the discussion was that Dai Qua would be in charge of burning the Turban cavalrymen who charged into the camp, while Bai Shuang would be in charge of destroying the surrounding troops. Right now, Bai Shuang was carrying out his plan. In front of him was a large pit filled with Turkmen cavalry. Before the rest of the enemy cavalry could figure out what was going on, they were surrounded by 4 groups of godlike cavalry. First, they were killed by a volley of arrows, followed by a close-range charge. The general didn't know the soldiers, and the soldiers didn't know the general. With just a wave of attacks, the 5,000 Turban cavalrymen were completely disoriented. The number of soldiers was also rapidly decreasing. Very soon, the 4th Regiment had completely taken the initiative in terms of military strength. One could imagine that the next step would be a one-sided massacre. As for Tushi, at this moment, he was trying his best to charge outwards under the long-range attacks of the archers. Until now, they had not even seen the shadow of a single 5-star army cavalry. All they had encountered were arrows that came from all directions, filling the sky with deadly arrows. When they charged in, they had to cross over piles of snow that were close to a person's height. When they left, it was the same. It was precisely because of the appearance of these snow piles that countless cavalrymen fell here. Seeing the number of soldiers around him decreasing, Tushi was burning with anxiety. At this moment, he only wanted to join the cavalry army in the east because he firmly believed that he still had the advantage in terms of numbers. Finally, after paying an unknown price and losing an unknown number of warriors, the snow piles were pushed to the ground one by one. Tushi, under the protection of a group of personal guards, followed the main force and killed their way out. In the distance, he finally saw the 5,000 cavalry stopped at a distance of 5 miles. "General, what's going on?" the Turpan Chiliarch asked with a look of surprise on his face. Originally, they thought that the people who escaped from here would be the defeated soldiers of the 5-star army. They never thought that it would be their own people. If it wasn't for his good eyesight, they would have killed each other just now. Don't mention it. Tushi gasped for breath, and with a look of relief on his face, he said, "We've been tricked. This is an empty camp. The five-star army knew that we would come. What should we do?" He didn't expect this to be the enemy's plan. For a moment, the Kiliarch's face was filled with shock. He didn't know what to do and even panicked. "What are you afraid of?" Seeing the panicked look on the Kiliarch's face, Tushi was furious. "Don't forget that even if we were ambushed, we still have the advantage in numbers. How about this? Let's immediately join up with the other team and kill our way back. I'd like to see how the five-star corps, whose numbers are inferior to ours, will be wiped out by us in a real battle." Tushi was indeed very angry. He brought 30,000 cavalrymen, but couldn't defeat the five-star army, which had less than 10,000 cavalrymen. This made him feel great shame. While his heart was burning with anger, more than 100 cavalrymen escaped from a distance. Because it was dark, both sides couldn't see very clearly. However, a loud shout came from the Turpan army. "Who are you people?" The cavalrymen on the opposite side, who seemed like they could escape at any time, crazily rushed over while shouting, "We are on the same side, on the same side." They were indeed on the same side. They were the deserters from the 5,000 cavalrymen who were defeated by the sudden appearance of the White Shuang 4th Regiment. The arrival of these people told Tushi that his army had once again suffered a heavy blow. At this time, of the 25,000 cavalrymen he had brought with him, there were only about 10,000 left. Perhaps there should be some fleeing cavalrymen nearby, but in any case, in terms of numbers, he no longer had any advantage. "General, are we still going to kill our way back?" After losing another 5,000 cavalrymen, a Chiliarch in the army asked Tushi with a trace of uncertainty. At this time, Tushi's face was very ugly, and the muscles on his face were trembling from time to time. He knew that he had suffered such a big loss, so of course he wanted to immediately kill his way back. However, considering the current turmoil in the army and the fact that he didn't know how many five-star army cavalrymen he would have to face, there were too many uncertainties if he went back now. For a gentleman to take revenge, 10 years is not too late. Reason prevailed over anger, and in the end, Tushi suppressed the killing intent in his heart and said, "Retreat. Let's return to the main camp first and then discuss further. These five-star army can't escape." Tushi didn't forget that he still had 5,000 cavalrymen left in the main camp. If he met up with them and gathered some of the defeated soldiers, his strength still couldn't be underestimated. But he never thought that at this time, his main camp was already a sea of fire. Just a quarter of an hour after Tushi left with his 25,000 cavalrymen, a five-star army appeared like divine soldiers. They were completely unprepared and didn't even think that someone would attack them. In just an hour, other than 500 cavalrymen who escaped, the rest were either killed or captured. At the same time, the money and provisions they left in the army were all given to the Dingshan reconnaissance group, who was in charge of Tushi. The ones who suddenly appeared here were the Dingshan reconnaissance group that followed closely behind. Originally, his and Ma Xiangshan's light cavalry were being chased by the 30,000 cavalrymen of the Yirkiang kingdom. In front of them were 30,000 Turpan cavalrymen, and behind them were 30,000 Yirkiang cavalrymen. This group of only 10,000 people seemed to be in danger of being attacked from both sides at any time. In the eyes of ordinary people, these two groups of 10,000 cavalrymen should be walking on thin ice with every step they took. But unexpectedly, they actually chose to take the initiative to attack. With the help of the telegram, this technology that was definitely ahead of the times, Yang Qindong, who was far away in Turpan, organized this large meeting and achieved the goal of heavily injuring the 30,000 Turpan cavalrymen. And this was just the beginning, because Yang Qindong's next target was the Yirkiang kingdom's 30,000 cavalrymen. This would be their second target. Before the news of the rapid defeat of Tushi's troops spread, Yang Qindong sent another order in the telegram. In the night, Bai Shuang's 4th Regiment, Dai Kuo's 1st Cavalry Division, and Dingshan's reconnaissance group began to merge together. Then, an encirclement began to form, waiting for the enemy to fall into the trap. Dingshan's reconnaissance group left first, leaving all of the heavy responsibility to the light cavalry commander Ma Xiangshan. In this regard, not only did he not feel fear, on the contrary, he was full of fighting spirit. Since it was called a light cavalry division, it could naturally develop the cavalry's speed to the extreme. Just based on this point, Ma Xiangshan did not put the 3 Yirqiang armies behind him in his eyes. It was to the extent that if he wanted to, he could disappear from the enemy's line of sight at any time. But for the sake of the big picture, Ma Xiangshan did not do this. Not only that, he also deliberately slowed down his pace and also deliberately spread the news of Dingshan's reconnaissance group leaving. Just like Tushi, Yirqiang's Aleifu also received the order to closely follow the 5-star army in front of him, waiting for them to arrive at the Ayla Mountain Pass to launch a large-scale battle. It was precisely because of this order that although the 5-star army in front of him was not fast, Aleifu was not in a hurry. Wasn't the enemy advancing towards the target set by his side? Since this was the case, it was enough. In Aleifu's eyes, the 10,000 5-star army cavalry in front of him were already turtles in a jar. He only needed to wait for a while, and when they arrived at the designated location, it would be time to destroy them. Just as Aleifu brought the 30,000 cavalry and maintained a certain distance behind the 10,000 5-star army cavalry, a piece of news suddenly reached his ears. The target he was closely following had changed from 10,000 to 5,000, and there were still 5,000 who were missing. Where did they go? Did they escape? Or do they have other missions? Aleifu did not know anything about all of this. This was not because he was careless, but because the 10,000 5-star army cavalry he was watching were all quite strong. Regardless of whether it was the scouting group or the cavalry, they all had powerful anti-reconnaissance abilities. Once a scout left the main force and approached them, it would often be like a stone sinking into the sea without any news. In addition, apart from the Ayla Mountain Pass, there were no other important cities nearby. Over time, in order to reduce unnecessary losses, Aleifu did not send people to watch the enemy. It was because of this that Aleifu was half a beat late in receiving the news of the scouting group's disappearance. After learning that the enemy had actually lost half of their men, Aleifu had a bad feeling in his heart. On the battlefield, any change could have an extremely important impact, not to mention the disappearance of 5,000 cavalry. No, I can't let the situation become even more complicated. Aleifu was afraid that the change in front of him would affect the overall situation, so he decided to abandon his previous plan and take action in advance. As long as the 5,000-strong cavalry of the 5th-star army was wiped out, it would be equivalent to dealing a heavy blow to the 5th-star army. This way, there would be a change in the military strength of both sides. In this way, even the 5,000-strong cavalry hidden in the shadows would be of little use. Chapter 1247. Order all the captains and Qian madams to speed up the march and catch up to the 5-star army cavalry in front. Surround them and destroy them. Aleifu also made the decision to change the plan. On this point, he made the same choice as General Tushi, and it was this method that caused him to fall into eternal damnation. With their superior military strength, if they followed the plan, it would be very difficult for the 5-star army to seriously injure them and defeat them on the battlefield. Even if the 5-star army cavalry was stronger, the lack of numbers was always a problem. On the other hand, once the cavalry of the 5-star army moved, they would reveal countless openings, and there would be the possibility of them being caught and attacked head-on. The 30,000 Yirqiang cavalry had long been annoyed. Following the enemy all the way, it was obvious that they were stronger and could not attack. It was like a hungry person with delicious food in front of them that they could not eat. That kind of feeling was really unpleasant. Now it was good. They could finally attack. Each one of them vented out the fire that had been suppressed along the way. For a moment, the 10 battalions, with each battalion having 3,000 people, began to chase the new light cavalry 20 miles ahead, as if they were in a race. Aleifu did not stop the battalions from chasing instead of fighting together. On the contrary, he was happy to see all of this. In his view, this was the strongest morale of the army. The Kiliarchs under him wanted to perform meritorious deeds. As the main general, he had no reason to stop them. If 30,000 cavalry walked together, it would not be easy to eat them. But if the army was divided into 10, it was completely different. They were destined to regret splitting their military strength. 20 miles ahead of the light cavalry regiment, when the Yirkiang cavalry behind them began a fierce chase, Ma Xiangshan, as the regiment commander, quickly received the news. However, he wasn't in a hurry. Instead, he said to the battalion commanders below, "Wait a moment. We'll retreat when they get closer. Otherwise, I'm really worried that they won't be able to catch up to us if we leave now." Haha. The 12 battalion commanders under him all had a face full of laughter. This was also because they had full confidence in their speed. If they did not have enough speed, they would not be called a light cavalry regiment. 15 li, 10 li, 8 li, 5 li. Soon, when the distance between the two sides was less than 5 miles, the light cavalry regiment moved. They seemed to have just discovered their pursuers and began to flee towards the Ala mountain pass. When Alefu heard the movement of the 5,000 five-star army's cavalry, he looked up at the sky and saw that the sun had risen to its highest point. He chuckled and said, "It's noon now. If there are no accidents, the five-star army will collide with the Turpan Kingdom's Tushi general by nightfall. We have 60,000 people in total, while the other side only has 5,000. It's really not enough to kill." "Huh, you're right, General. It's just that we still have to speed up. We can't give the credit to the Turpan army." A Madame Qian chimed in with a laugh, voicing her concerns. Of course, he couldn't give the benefits to Tushi. How about this? Give the order to speed up and strive for the greatest credit. Also, I don't want these 5,000 five-star army's cavalry to see the sun rise tomorrow. Since they were fleeing towards the Ala mountain pass, Alefu had nothing to worry about. The entire way was filled with the cavalry of the five-star army. He really could not think of any dangers. If there was a possibility, it would be that their contributions might be snatched away by others. Alefu was extremely confident. However, if he knew that the Tushi general's army of 30,000 had suffered heavy losses and was currently fleeing like stray dogs, he would not be so confident. Instead, he would immediately order the army to gather and assume a defensive stance. The battle that had happened a few hours ago did not have a powerful means of communication like the radio. Alefu walked step by step toward the traps set by Yang Chendong. The pursuit began. On one side, there were 5,000 light cavalry soldiers with a 5-star flag. On the other side, there were 10 battalions of Yirkiang cavalry with 3,000 people in each battalion. They stepped through the snow and galloped north of the Heavenly Mountain on the road to the Ala mountain pass. Under Ma Xiangshan's intentional control, the pursuers behind them maintained a distance of about 5 li, neither more nor less. This was a distance that filled people with hope, but at the same time, it was also a distance that filled people with despair. As the two sides continued to run, the sun set from the sky and the sky gradually darkened. However, this did not stop the pursuers behind them from stopping. This was because they knew that if they continued to run forward, they would run into the 30,000 Turkmen cavalry. If they were too far away, the credit of taking down the 5-star army's cavalry would not be theirs. Of course, they did not know that the Yirkiang cavalry thought that they would meet up with the Turkmen cavalry, but in reality, what awaited them was a well-designed trap. The battle that had defeated the 30,000 Turkmen cavalry last night had already ended at daybreak. At this moment, the 10,000 5-star army cavalry that had rested for an entire day were waiting for their prey to enter the trap. "They're here! They're here!" There were already scouts running over to report to Dai Qua, Bai Shuang, and Ding Shan. Prepare to attack. When the three commanders received the news, their eyes couldn't help but light up. This was the light of excitement before a big battle, filled with confidence. Ma Xiangshan was still running ahead, but if one looked closer, they would discover that their formation was not the slightest bit messed up. From this, It could be seen that their current speed was not their limit. It's about time. Inform everyone to prepare for a counterattack at any time. Seeing that the sky had completely darkened, Ma Xiangshan's mouth revealed a smile. According to the plan, the time for the counterattack was about to arrive. This time, he must kill his way back and teach the Yi Erqiang cavalry who had been chasing him for a few hours a lesson. The 30,000 Yirqiang cavalry were completely unaware of all this as they continued to pursue. Some of them were extremely anxious, worried that the Yirqiang cavalry would snatch the credit. If that happened, their half a day of pursuit would be meaningless. In order to snatch the credit, some of them did not even hesitate to overdraft the speed of their war horses to get as close to their target as possible. They've stopped. Unknowingly, a scout's shout came from the front. This shout caused the pursuing Yirqiang cavalry to tremble. They believed that the 5-star army cavalry must have seen the Turpan cavalry camp and stopped. If that was the case, they were afraid that there was no door to heaven and no road to hell. Haha, warriors, follow me and attack. In a very short period of time, the pursuing Yirqiang cavalry gave the order to attack with all their might. One by one, the war horses rushed forward at their fastest speed, afraid that they would not be able to do anything and would not be able to get any credit. Come on, the faster you charge, the weaker your war horses will be when you run later. Haha. At this time, Ma Xiangshan had already ordered the troops to stop and get into formation. The soldiers were all armed with bows and crossbows, ready to counterattack at any time. For Li, 3 li, 1 li. Finally, the distance between the two sides was less than 200 meters. When they could see each other's figures under the moonlight, the battle was completely ignited at this moment. Xiao, xiao, xiao. Xiao, xiao, xiao. Countless arrows were shot out from Ma Xiangshan's light cavalry unit. Under the dense rain of arrows, the Yirqiang cavalry fell to the ground one after another. The closest cavalry unit of 3,000 men was heavily injured. Regarding this, the other cavalry units acted as if they did not see this. They could not wait for someone else to attract the firepower of the 5-star army cavalry. This way, they would be able to charge forward more smoothly. Then, it would be time for them to charge forward and beat the master to death with their fists. Xiao, xiao, xiao. Xiao, xiao, xiao. The arrows were still flying. The difference was that not only were the Yirqiang cavalry in front attacked by the arrows, but the cavalry that wanted to circle around from the sides were also attacked by the arrows. For a moment, the Yirqiang cavalry were killed or injured by the arrows. What's going on? There are only 5,000 of them. How can they have such a powerful archery ability? The Yirqiang soldiers who were leading the charge at the front all had puzzled expressions on their faces. When they realized that their own cavalry unit was also attacked by the arrows and the casualties were not low, they were all at a loss as if they had been struck by lightning. This doubt had only just arisen when someone quickly gave them an answer. All of a sudden, countless torches lit up and deafening battle cries rang out from all directions. The Far East Army's 1st Cavalry Division, 1st Cavalry Division's 4th Cavalry Regiment, and the new Army's Reconnaissance Regiment that had been lying in ambush finally appeared. They launched a multi-pronged attack straight at the Yirqiang tribe's cavalry that was charging at the front. The many torches seemed to light up the sky at this moment and also shattered the fighting spirit of the Yirqiang cavalry in an instant. They did not understand why so many enemies suddenly appeared here. Where did they come from? Divine soldiers and generals? Shouldn't this be the Turpan army's encampment? Why can't I see them? Where do they go? Too many questions filled their minds, to the point that many of the Yirqiang cavalry could not make the right judgment and order in the first place. They could only watch as the 5-star army cavalry rushed out of nowhere and scattered their troops, then slaughtered them one by one. Chapter 1248. Retreat, retreat. Some of the generals finally regained their senses. When they saw the 5-star army charging towards them like a ferocious tiger, they instinctively gave the order to retreat. The moment the order was given, the Yirqiang cavalry had already lost count of how many of them were dead and how many had fallen off their horses due to injuries. Those who surrender will be spared. Those who resist will be killed without mercy. White Shuang shouted as he brandished his dual blades. Facts had proven that this slogan could decide the outcome of a battle and could also break the morale of an army. In just a quarter of an hour, a battalion of 3,000 cavalry had been completely destroyed. Just the number of people who surrendered had reached 2,300. This was only the beginning. One side was already prepared and was waiting for the enemy to arrive, while the other side was beaten until they were dizzy and had no idea what was going on. They didn't even know where to run next. The 30,000 cavalry had become 30,000 headless flies. They had completely lost the will to fight and didn't know who to fight. In the dark night, there were shadows everywhere. The Yirkiang army, who had no target, only resisted for less than half an hour before they were defeated and began to retreat. But even if they wanted to escape, they couldn't speed up. Who asked them to keep urging their horses forward? They had exhausted the potential of their horses. If they wanted to escape now, they would have to see if their comrades were willing to cooperate with them. Retreat, retreat. Aleifu, who was at the back of the army, was quite lucky. Perhaps because he was already a general leading 30,000 troops, he didn't rush to the front when there was no need for his subordinates to snatch the credit. His position was equivalent to saving his life. It allowed him to be the first to retreat when he saw that the situation wasn't good. Aleifu, who didn't even have the heart to resist, led the 3 battalions on the left, middle, and right, a total of 9,000 cavalry, and flew backwards. At this moment, he didn't know how many people there were in the 5-star army and which division they belonged to. He only knew one thing to do, and that was to retreat and escape. The main general had fled, and the other battalions were only able to put up some resistance. For hours later, when the sky began to brighten, the battle was over. The only people left on the battlefield were the soldiers of the 5-star army who were holding bloody sabers in their hands. This night, they had killed to their heart's content. Just a preliminary count showed that they had killed more than 3,000 cavalry and captured more than 17,000. In other words, this battle had completely destroyed Aleifu's main force. He had only managed to escape with 10,000 cavalry. On the other hand, the 5-star army only had less than 1,000 casualties. Most of them were injured. The number of people who had died in battle was less than 300. It was another great victory. Bai Shuang, Dai Qua, Ding Shan, and Ma Xiangshan didn't look tired. Very good. We've completed the initial mission given by the 6th young master. Next, we'll have to take advantage of the victory to pursue the enemy. Commander Ding, thank you for your hard work. The one who spoke was Bai Shuang. At the end of his words, he looked at Ding Shan. Ding Shan's expression was very unsightly because he would have to withdraw from the battlefield. After all, after 2 battles, the number of cavalry captives alone exceeded 20,000. These people had to be sent away. Otherwise, they would become a burden and trouble for the following battles. Of course, this wasn't Bai Shuang's idea. Otherwise, Ding Shan could have refused. But this was Yang Qindong's will, the will of the king. No one in the Yang faction or the 5-star army dared to go against it. Ding Shan didn't say anything. Although he would definitely obey Yang Qindong's orders, it didn't mean he was willing to do so, until White Shuang came up to him and patted him on the shoulder. Commander Ding Shan, you still have a chance. If you can quickly escort these captives to Hobok Seri, you might have a chance to participate in the Battle of Ala Mountain Pass. Ding Shan, who originally thought that he had no hope, heard this and his eyes lit up. Yes, haha. Thank you for your reminder. I know what to do. Ha ha. Men, gather the captives and confiscate their weapons. If they resist, deal with them as enemies. With new hope in his heart, Ding Shan had a lot more motivation to do his work. Bai Shuang, Dai Qua, and Ma Xiangshan didn't look at the scouts anymore. What they needed to do now was to rest for the morning and head to Turpan in the afternoon. There was still a big battle waiting for them there. You two, we have to speed up. Aleif escaped. I'm afraid that the news here will spread soon. If that's the case, the new army will be in great danger. Bai Shuang took the opportunity while the soldiers were taking the time to rest. He took the initiative to find Dai Qua and Ma Xiangshan, the two military commanders, to discuss the next military plan. 100,000 Walla cavalry were riding through the thick snow. 50 li in front of them was their target, the new army of the five-star army. You team up, and I team up. Everyone was heading toward the Ayla mountain pass. Before reaching their destination, no one thought that the war would break out early. The Walla General Bomu also didn't think that it would happen. Speaking of which, as the only survivor of Yeshin's 4 generals, Bomu had extremely high military command ability. He was a general who could both attack and defend. This was why every time Yeshen went out, he was always at ease, leaving the rear in Bomu's hands. In Yeshin's view, he didn't lack fierce generals on the battlefield. What he really lacked was a general who could defend his base and constantly change his command on the battlefield to make the most beneficial to his army. Without a doubt, Bomu was such a talent. It was precisely because he was a talent that Bomu was not as optimistic as the generals of the other countries. He had studied Yang Qindong. This was a person who planned before acting. He didn't act, but when he did act, he wanted to see the results. This kind of commander was not to be provoked. Everything he did had a strong purpose. Perhaps there were some things that one couldn't see the use of for the time being, but that didn't mean that what he did was useless. It only proved that one's vision was not there yet. After a period of time, everyone would realize that his seemingly useless move earlier had come in handy at this moment, hadn't it? With a sufficient understanding of Yang Qindong, Bomu was not as optimistic as the other generals. Since Yang Qindong was extremely talented in commanding an army, why would he make such a suicidal move? If this time, Yang Qindong knew that the 1st Cavalry Division was in danger, it wouldn't be surprising if he sent a large army or even personally led the expedition. Only this method of sending out reinforcements made Bomu unable to figure out what he wanted to do. Bomu had also thought, if he were Yang Qindong, what would he do next? Would he counterattack on the way to the Ayla mountain pass? It seemed very difficult to do this. After all, it looked like the 5-star army was sandwiching the 5-nation coalition army. But how could it not be that the 5-nation coalition army was sandwiching the 5-star army? On any battlefield, one side had 3 times the strength of the other side. This made Bomu see no hope or possibility of victory. Bomu had also wondered if the 5-star army would suddenly launch a 2-army sandwiching attack. But as soon as this thought appeared, it immediately disappeared. If they really did this, the 5-nation coalition army was not to be trifled with. Wouldn't they find out and send out troops? If that was the case, the 5-star army would not be able to gain any advantage in the end. It could be said that among these generals, Bomu was the only one who used his brain. It was only because he never thought that an army would suddenly enter the battlefield that he overlooked something. This was why he did not see Yang Qindong's tactics and strategic intentions. Bomu closed the open map in his hand again and handed it to the person beside him. He let out a long sigh and then looked forward, seemingly deep in thought. Along the way, he had seen Bomu reveal this kind of thoughtful expression more than once. Of course, he knew what he was worried about. As a Walla warrior, his personality was straightforward and his words were also straightforward. General, you don't have to worry. In this battle, we have 100,000 elite Walla cavalry. The other side only has 30,000 cavalry. Even if they want to play any tricks in the face of absolute strength, they're still not our opponents. General, are you thinking too much? Am I really thinking too much? Bomu, of course, knew that what Bomu said was the truth. He had 100,000 elite Walla cavalry. Even if he faced the main force of the 5-star army, he still had the strength to fight and had a great chance of winning. And now, the opponent was only 30,000 cavalry. What was there to be afraid of? 100,000 cavalry seemed to give him endless strength. He laughed and said, "That's right. Maybe this general is thinking too much. Come, bring wine. We will drink wine and watch how the 5-star army is destroyed by us this time." Bomu regained his spirit. Naturally, Bomu was very happy. He immediately ordered a guard to bring wine. He wanted to drink and celebrate the upcoming victory with the general in advance. 2 wine bags were quickly sent to the two of them. After a light tap, the two of them took a big gulp. Bomu reached out and wiped the wine from the corner of his mouth. He let out a long sigh. We really don't need to be afraid of anything, but what we should do must be done well. Bomu, in a while, you will inform the troops to follow closely. If there is any situation, do not act without authorization. Focus on defense and wait for the final order to attack. Chapter 1249. Yes, General. Pai Chien had followed Bomu for many years and had seen him save the army out of caution more than once. Therefore, he did not raise any objections this time. He also believed that the army of 100,000 needed to be disciplined. Only in this way could they remain calm in the face of change and not panic. It was said that soldiers followed the heart of the general. With such a cautious general leading the army, it had to be said that the 5-star army's counterattack would be a great obstacle. 50 li in front of the army, led by Bomu, Sui was also leading the new army cavalry towards the Ala Mountain Pass. Their speed was also not fast, only slightly faster than ordinary infantry. The new army had been conserving their strength under the leadership of Su He. Many of the officers had already raised their suspicions about why they were moving so slowly. The order they had received was to go to the Ala Mountain Pass to rescue the 1st Cavalry Division that was heavily surrounded. That was the 1st Cavalry Division, which had always been regarded as the most powerful cavalry. Now that they needed their help, one could imagine how excited everyone was. Suhi was even more so. As someone who had once competed with Tian, who for the position of commander of the 1st Cavalry Division, he had always regarded it as his responsibility to surpass the other party. Now that the opportunity had finally come, he was so excited that he did not even sleep well. However, with the appearance of the telegrams, Suhi's excited heart quickly cooled down. After learning about Yang Chendong's military plan, Suhi knew that the idea of rescuing the 1st Cavalry Division would not be possible. This made him feel a little disappointed, but when he looked back at the 100,000 Walla cavalry chasing behind him, he felt a little excited. If he could inflict serious damage to this army, it would be a great achievement. Now that he knew the entire plan, Suhi faced the doubts of his subordinates. He used the excuse that the 30,000 Yirkiang cavalry were in front of them, and that if they moved too fast, it was very likely that they would run into them. At that time, they would face the risk of being attacked from both sides. Not long after, the 4 division commanders appeared in front of Su He, and he relayed the next step of the battle plan to them. When the 4 division commanders heard that their plan to save the 1st Cavalry Division was fake and that their real goal was to get rid of the 100,000 Walla cavalry behind them, they were both excited and nervous. Although the new army prided themselves on their strength and dared to go head-to-head with the 1st Cavalry Division, they had to admit that the huge difference in numbers was an important factor that hindered them from completing their plan. But when they knew that they had to deal with 100,000 Walla cavalry this time, they had to admit that the huge difference in numbers was an important factor that hindered them from completing their plan. They had to admit that with such a huge gap, it would be very difficult for them to complete the mission. Only our new army, Kalu, the commander of the 1st Cavalry Division, asked the question that everyone wanted to ask. So he looked at Kalu with a gaze of praise. This person had matured very quickly, and his ability to see the big picture was also very effective. He was a good seedling, and he was able to ask the main point of the matter with a single sentence. In order to give everyone confidence, Suhi said, "Of course, it's not only us. I can tell you that just last night and this morning, the 1st Cavalry Division's 4th Regiment, the Far Eastern Army's 1st Cavalry Division, and the new Army's Light Cavalry Regiment have already defeated 30,000 Turks and 30,000 Yirkiang cavalry. They are now rushing towards us, and as long as we meet up, it will be time for us to launch an all-out counterattack. At that time, the foreign race's 1st army will appear from the rear of the Walla army. When the disparity in numbers isn't too great, We will definitely be able to deal a heavy blow to the Walla army and break the Allied army's operation against our 5-star army. This was their trump card, and also the source of their confidence. If everything was as Suhi said, then they would have a total of 80,000 people. With a difference of 10,000 soldiers, they would be able to make up for this gap. Then there's no problem. When Kalu heard this, he nodded happily. He was most worried that they wouldn't have enough soldiers. If the disparity was too great, then this battle wouldn't be easy to fight. After all, the Walla cavalry wasn't to be trifled with. Before the 5-star army appeared, they were the strongest existence. Even the Tatar cavalry wasn't their opponent. The other 3 division commanders also nodded in agreement. Then, their bodies emitted a rumbling battle intent. It could be seen that they were also very eager to fight and continue to make contributions. Okay, everyone knows the situation. Now, you can all return to your divisions and give your orders to the officers below. Remember, don't let the cat out of the bag before we meet up with the army. There are a lot of tile scouts around us. Suhi was giving advice to the 4 division commanders, reminding them that they must keep the secret well. Unlike the other countries, the Walla cavalry's riding skills weren't inferior to the 5-star army's cavalry. In addition, Bomir was very careful. Not long after the army set off from Tufan City, there were already Walla scouts keeping an eye on them. Although Suhi had sent people to surround and kill them, there were always batches after batches of them died. Because the combat strength of both sides was similar, in the end, no one would end up well. In the end, Suhi could only let them watch him from the side. Anyway, before they met up with the army, he wouldn't do anything out of the ordinary. Being watched like this could lower Bomir's vigilance. After the 4 division commanders agreed, they all retreated and waited to meet up with Bai Shuang and the rest. 2 days later, the first to arrive wasn't the 5-star army's cavalry. Instead, it was Aleifu's 10,000 cavalry that escaped from the west. Previously, Suhi received a telegram from Commander Bai Shuang saying that Aleifu and the 10,000 Yirkiang cavalry were likely to appear on the path of the new army. For this, Suhi also made some arrangements. For example, she sent the 2nd Cavalry Division to the front and the 3rd Cavalry Division and the 4th Cavalry Division to the left and right. She also told them that once they encountered the defeated cavalry of Yi Erqiang, they did not need to talk. They could just kill them directly. But at the same time, he didn't want to meet them. After all, it was 10,000 cavalry. Without a suitable encirclement, it wouldn't be easy to defeat them. Naturally, Suhi was worried that once he fought with Aleifu's 10,000 cavalrymen, Bomir, who was behind him, would soon receive the news. If he couldn't destroy this enemy quickly, it was likely that the new 3rd Army would face the risk of being attacked from both sides. This was not what he wanted to see, but things might not develop as expected. It was just like how he didn't expect to meet this enemy cavalry, but they still met in the end. When Suhi received the news from the scouts that there was a cavalry with Yi Erqiang's flag on the road ahead, she let out a sigh of relief and ordered the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th divisions to attack. We must defeat this enemy in the shortest time possible. At the same time, inform the 1st Cavalry Division to block the charge of the Walla cavalry and buy us enough time to deal with the enemy. Next, it would be a competition to see who was faster. This would most likely determine the direction of the war. After Aleifu's defeat, he led 10,000 cavalry to the east. The reason why he didn't escape and continued to walk on the official road was so that he could join forces with the Walla cavalry to eliminate the new army of the 5-star army. First, there was Torpons in action, which led to the loss of the city. Then there was the sneak attack here, leaving only 10,000 men left. After 2 defeats, Aleifu knew that if he couldn't make a beautiful comeback, even if he escaped back to Yirkiang, he would face the risk of losing his position and being imprisoned. In order to be able to take the blame for his crimes, Aleifu had no choice but to walk on the official road and fight with his back to the river. After 2 defeats, Aleifu learned his lesson this time. He first sent out a large number of scouts to scout ahead. At the same time, he also sent a group of elite scouts to take a detour. Their mission was to meet General Bomir of the Wara and tell him what happened to them. Then, they would form a pincer attack on the new army. After sending out the scouts, Alefu ordered the army to be ready for a defensive battle at any time. He only had 10,000 cavalry, so he wouldn't charge at the Xian San army that had 30,000 cavalry. He only needed to stand guard here and wait for the Walla cavalry to rush up. Then he could launch a pincer attack. It was because he was already prepared that when he learned that the new army was 10 miles in front of him, Alefu decisively ordered the army to stop and defend. After doing this, he began to pray that the Walla cavalry must be faster. Perhaps the prayers had worked, but in fact, it was the small team of scouts that had been sent out. They had met the scouts of the Walla army before the battle had even started. After revealing their identities, the scouts led them to the general of the Walla army, Bomir. What? The 5-star army took the lead to launch a counterattack? Your General Alefu was defeated and lost 20,000 of his 30,000 cavalry? Bomir, who was riding on his horse, saw the Yirkiang cavalry under a withered tree. From them, he learned some things that happened 2 days ago. It's not that he didn't consider this possibility, but after thinking about it, he didn't think that the 5-star army would try to break a stone with an egg. After all, the disparity in strength was obvious. It's just that he forgot a very important point. That was, not every army of the 5-star army had the strength of the Walla cavalry. This was his biggest oversight. Fortunately, although Alefu's army was defeated, he wasn't scared out of his wits. He still wanted to take the blame. As a result, it gave him an opportunity to attack the new army from both sides. There were more than 30,000 cavalry of the 5-star army in front of him. If he could completely eliminate them, it would be a heavy blow to the 5-star army and Bugnam of Gojoseon. When he thought of this result, Bomir's face was full of excitement. Where is Biki-in? You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.